I
Alan John Kyerematen,
swear by the Almighty God
swear by the Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give before this committee
that the evidence I shall give before this committee
touching the matter in issue shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Honorable Alan Kyerematen, on behalf of the committee, congratulate you on your nomination to the position of Minister for Trade and Industry. You have held this position in the last government. You've served in other positions in public service previously under President Kufuor. You're a lawyer, and you've worked in the banking industry for a while. You've represented Ghana as the Director of Africa in the UNDP. You've been Chief Executive of Empretec. Now, in addition to these, is there anything you wish to tell us briefly?
Thank you, Honorable Chair, and let me use this opportunity to say a good afternoon to honorable members. Chairman, having so graciously outlined the key elements of my profile, I believe there's nothing more to add. Thank you.
Very well.
Chairman, let me also join you in congratulating Alan Kyerematen. Chairman, did I hear him say that beyond what he has given us, he doesn't have anything to add? President Nana Addo Dankwa will be barred by the Constitution to seek re-election if he ends his mandate. Is your presidential ambition alive?
Mr. Chairman, I'm sure my very good friend, Honorable the Minority Leader, threw this in just to welcome me. So I'll pass the question.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I had the privilege to walk into Honorable Alan Kyerematen's shoe as Minister of Trade and Industry. I'm not sure the ministry is as esteemed as he left it or as I left it. A lot have happened with many of the roles shifting to finance, even on matters of trade facilitation. But to lead him on, Economic Partnership Agreement, the EU post-Brexit, the relationships have changed. And Ghana will have to have an independent relationship with the European Union and probably another with the United Kingdom, given Brexit. What are you doing to enhance trade between Ghana and the EU and trade between Ghana and the UK? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, let me first start with the EU. Mr. Chairman, in August 2016, Ghana ratified the Interim Economic Partnership Agreement between the European Union and Ghana. This agreement provides duty-free and quota-free access to our respective markets. It took a little bit of time for both the EU and Ghana to agree on the implementation arrangements. As I speak now, from the 1st of January, the provisions of the agreement require both countries to start implementing the provisions of the agreement. And in trade agreements, there is what is called Tariff Liberalization Schedule. That is the schedule that determines the time that both countries would open up their markets for preferential trade agreement between the two countries. So beginning from 1st of January, both the EU and Ghana will start implementing the terms of the Interim Economic Partnership Agreement. With respect to the UK, Mr. Chairman, you will recall that the UK had been part of the EU, and therefore the trading relationship between Ghana and the UK was defined within the context of the Economic Partnership Agreement between the EU and Ghana, which I've just referred to. But with the exit of the UK from the European Union, it became necessary for Ghana to negotiate a new agreement with the UK. Now, under normal circumstances, this ought not to have been a contentious one regarding the long-standing bonds of friendship between Ghana and the UK. So we started technical consultations in March 2018, hoping that we could come to an agreement before the exit date of the UK from the EU. Regrettably, there were major differences of opinion between Ghana and the UK in respect of the content of that agreement. The position of the UK had been that since we already had an agreement with the EU, of which UK was part, in their own view, if they were exiting from the EU, then the principle of continuity ought to be invoked, meaning that the provisions that were underpinning the agreement between Ghana and the EU should now be applied between Ghana and the UK. And we had a major disagreement with that position of the UK. I mean, we recognize that having exited from the EU, the UK had a major challenge to negotiate individual trade agreements with every country that the EU had a relationship with. So we understood the challenge that they had, and that was why they were using this continuity principle. But the reason why we disagreed with the principle of continuity was that the EU-Ghana agreement that I've just referred to, it's inconsistent with the provisions of the customs union of Ecowas. Technically speaking, we are now a member of the Ecowas Customs Union. And if you're a member of the Ecowas Customs Union, you have no flexibility to negotiate outside the customs union without the concurrence of the customs union. And the same thing that applied to the UK. When the UK was part of the EU, they had absolutely no authority to negotiate outside the EU. So our position was that if we now have to sign an agreement with the UK, then it has to be consistent with the provisions of the Ecowas Customs Union. And we went back and forth for almost a year at the level of technical consultations until December 2020, when the UK was just about to exit, and we wanted to avoid a trade disruption between Ghana and the UK. So I decided to escalate the discussions to a higher political level to see whether there could be a breakthrough. Because we were proposing that we use an original text of a regional economic partnership agreement that had been signed between the EU and then Ecowas. We felt that that regional text should be the basis for the text of the agreement between Ghana and the UK, so that it will be consistent with the requirements of our customs union. So when I escalated the negotiations to the level of my counterpart, the Right Honorable Liz Strauss, in December, the last week of December, she graciously agreed that as an exception to their principle of continuity, they would accept our position to use the text of the Regional Economic Partnership Agreement as the basis for the new bilateral Ghana-UK agreement, so that once it enters into force, then it would not be difficult to convince Ecowas to also adopt that. So basically, where we are now, the President has given executive approval for the agreement. We've forwarded the agreement to Parliament. The UK government has signaled that on the 2nd of March, both countries will sign the new Ghana-UK agreement, and then it will enter into force, hopefully, on the 5th of March. So that's where we are.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate that. The bane of every finance minister in Ghana, from independence to yesterday, is the problem of imports outweighing exports, particularly rice and sugar. And rice in the sense that we have comparative advantage to produce it. We are spending close to $1 billion in importing just these two commodities annually. That affects our balance of payments, that affects the exchange rate and the stability of the city. As a minister responsible for the economy, what plans do you have to expand our exports and to reduce our imports? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman, I did not intend to create a problem for our President. I thought I heard the Honorable Minority Leader talk about me being responsible for the economy. If I heard you right, then...
responsible for trade and industry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I didn't say finance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, you are absolutely right. There's a major problem that has confronted this country for decades, for over a century, in terms of the number of products that we import into our country which could be produced locally. And as the Honorable Member of Parliament, the Minority Leader indicated, currently between these three commodities, sugar, rice, and then poultry, we're almost close to $1 billion of imports for absolutely no reason, because we have the local capacity to be able to do import substitution and produce these commodities. But this underpins the decision of His Excellency the President for Ghana to launch a comprehensive program for industrial transformation, which my ministry has been leading. And basically, this transformation program is anchored on two parallel tracks. First, to ensure that we produce to export, and secondly, also that we produce for the purposes of import substitution. And so we have very comprehensive interventions that we have put in place, and I'm sure as we go on in this exercise, these matters will come up. Very comprehensive transformational interventions that is building the capacity of local businesses to be able to import substitute and also even produce these products for export. So we are already on the right path, and that's the basis for our industrial transformation agenda. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chairman, thank you. Honorable nominee responsible for trade and industry, you are largely responsible for the implementation of the present flagship initiative, 1D, 1F, one district, one factory, which for all intents and purposes is intended to provide opportunities for many people and to lead our effort in industrialization. Can you provide us how many so far and give a regional background in the Upper East, Upper West through the 16 regions? How many 1D, 1F have you been able to initiate and where and the status of it? Thank you, Chair.
Chairman, Mr. Chairman, again, I think it is appropriate for me to indicate that the One District, One Factory initiative, which has been led by the Minister of Trade and Industry, is one of the most revolutionary interventions to have been introduced in our country since independence. It goes to the core of bringing industry and development to the doorstep of the ordinary people. And that is why we've pursued with aggression this whole program of One District, One Factory. Currently, we have 232 1D, 1F projects that are at various stages of implementation. And contrary to some of the comments that have been made, that the 1D, 1F is an attempt just to brush up existing companies. Indeed, whilst the program implementation framework allows for existing companies to be 1D, 1F companies. But if you look at the statistics, out of the 232 companies, only 64 are existing companies and 168 are new companies. Now, the breakdown is as follows. Projects currently operating as 1D, 1F is 76. Projects under construction is 107. And then projects ready to commence construction within the first half of this year is 49. And so far, out of the 232 projects, 56% are agro-processing projects, 22% general manufacturing, 5% meat processing, primary agriculture is 4%, and there are other industrial enterprises which constitute 13%. Through the intervention, of the 1D1F, 139,331 direct and indirect jobs have been created by the 76 companies that are already operational. 285,915 additional direct and indirect jobs are projected from the projects that are under construction. Mr. Chairman, through this initiative, we've been able to mobilize 2.3 billion Ghana cedis from local financial institutions. Government has provided interest subsidy payment to support 213, interest subsidy support of 213 million Ghana cedis. This is meant to de-risk the project for the banks because the interest subsidy then makes it easier for them to become more profitable. And in addition to that, 603 million import duty exemptions have been granted to 37 1B1F companies having come through this honorable house. Mr. Chairman, unfortunately, I do not have with me the regional breakdown, but this is the status.
So can you speak with certainty that as revolutionary as you describe it, it's in the Upper West region as in the Upper East region? Can you speak with certainty there are 1D initiatives in Bolga, Navrungu, Zebula, or any part of it, or in the Upper West region, whether Lambuse or Tumu or where in these two regions, I want to know whether the revolution have gotten there. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Chairman, as I indicated, I do not have the regional breakdown with me, and I think before this honorable house, it is appropriate that I give accurate information.
Chairman, we know that the last time he came to Parliament, the Upper West region did not benefit from it. There was one in the Upper East region, and our follow-up, there's no significant development in it. But let me now take you to another area. After you've done well with the president, which was initiated by late President Mills, this Free African Continental Trade Agreement, which is headquartered now in Ghana. Now, trade liberalization, particularly, I'm going to use Nigeria as a case study. Dangote Cement is in Ghana. Simaf, Moroccan, is in Ghana. Many Ghanaian entrepreneurs cannot break through the Nigerian market. And you are aware that there is what the Nigerians call the prohibited list of imports from Ghana into Nigeria. I know in the last couple of months, you've been trying to manage the problems associated with the GIPC limitation, even for retail trading within our country by foreigners and in particular Nigerians, which almost led to some diplomatic problems between our two countries. Now, Jata Cement is local. There's a local Ghanaian who is doing well to produce cement. What will you do to improve the competitiveness of the Ghanaian entrepreneur to match with their counterparts in Nigeria and beyond? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I indicated earlier on that to a large extent, under the leadership of our President and also under my own leadership, leading the ministry, we've been ahead of the coming into force of the AFCFTA. Because if time permits, and I go through some of the industrial initiatives that we've been implementing in the last 4 years, the question that has been put by the Honorable Minority Leader is answered by the decision that we have taken ahead of the AFTA to introduce initiatives that will enhance the local capacity of our businesses. preparing them to be able to export not only to Ecowas, but to the wider African market. I don't want to just dwell on the 1D1F, but the 1D1F is a major intervention that would enable our companies to be able to produce to meet the requirements of AFTA. But beyond that, as I said, there are other interventions which are already in place. But in addition to that, Mr. Chairman, specifically following the start of trading, we've already initiated a national program of action to identify different categories of Ghanaian companies that we would support to take advantage of AFTA. One category are companies that are already exporting to Africa. So these are low-hanging fruits. So we are distilling information on these existing companies. All we are doing is to make sure that we enhance their capacity to be able to sell more. Then there's another category of companies that are exporting currently, but not necessarily to Africa. So it means that they have the capacity to export. And so we are also helping them to identify specific products that they can now produce to export to the African market. And obviously also new companies that we can incubate specifically to target AFTA. So there's a lot that is already going on. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chairman, that's appreciated. I'll take the nominee to the manufacturing sector of Ghana. What's its contribution to our GDP? But I want you to respond relative to a lopsided industrial development in Ghana. Beyond Tema and Accra, and little portions of Ashanti region. And Chairman, we all can use it as an example. When it's 4:30 p.m. to 5:30, you see in the industrial area, maybe North Kaneshi, large army of young people come out, heading home. It means they've had a job to do and they have earned an income. Beyond Accra and Tema, I don't see that anywhere in the Brown Hafu region. I don't see that in the northern region, in the Upper East, Upper West region. And my faith is that this is how we can address the unemployment challenge. And probably you must have some thinking on light manufacturing, the light manufacturing industry. What plans do you have for that to address the growing unemployment in our country? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, even at the risk of sounding repetitive, I think it is important that I go back to the point that I made earlier on, that the government has already embarked on this very comprehensive program for industrial transformation. And I agree completely with the honorable member that currently, beyond Accra and Kumasi, there is little evidence of significant industrial activity. But that's the whole point about having a program that decentralizes industrial development, about the 1D1F in particular. But it also goes beyond the 1D1F, recognizing that the 1D1F typically may be medium-sized companies. We have also embarked on a program to support micro and small enterprises. And so as I speak now, we have established 67 business resource centers that will cover all the districts in Ghana. And these business resource centers, 37 of them are already operational, and the other 30 will be completed again by the middle of this year. Now, these BRCs, or Business Resource Centers, are one-stop enterprise support centers that are supposed to deliver business development services to micro, small enterprises throughout the country, so that what the honorable member is referring to will become a thing of the past. So if you are in maybe Tamale, South it's developed to the extent that we cannot necessarily put them in this category. But if you are in Bunkugu or any other part of the northern regions, or in Ashanti, or in the western north, any part of the country, now you have the opportunity to go to a business resource center that will provide you with a full complement of services to enable you either start your business or enhance the capacity of your current enterprise activity. So basically, what you're asking for, honorable member, is exactly what these business resource centers are doing.
Chairman, I want to just, for now, integrated customs management system, and you know, at the policy and institutional level, I support you that trade facilitation is not a function of finance or the Ministry of Finance. I think that under our WTO obligations and protocols, you should be leading matters of trade facilitation. The transition from GCNet to UNIPAS is likely to occasion a judgment debt for the country, because GCNet was readily providing those services, probably ably. I've heard some discrepancies in terms of numbers. How is revenue faring and how did revenue fare under the GCNet? You want to explain the circumstance that led to the termination of the GCNet agreement, which is likely to visit a judgment debt on our country? I thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, before I proceed to answer, I respectfully have a different opinion from the minority leader about the fact that what we've put in place as a new trade facilitation system is going to incur judgment debt. But let me give a little bit of a background to this. Without doubt, trade is the engine of growth for every country. And this explains why the most powerful economies of the world also happen to be the most powerful trading nations. So there is no debate about the value of trade. Now, when you talk about trade, then it's the facilitation of trade, the systems and processes that you put down in your country that allows trade to move on easily, freely, both import and export. Now, if you look at our trade facilitation space, over the last decades, 4 decades, since import licenses were abolished in the 70s, this space of import-export has been characterized by a multiplicity of service providers, which I describe as a spaghetti bowl of service providers. You have so many companies that are providing different types of services, very often not fully integrated and coordinated with each other. This, regrettably, has been one of the major reasons why there have been leakages in our trade facilitation landscape, and then, by extension, also our revenue mobilization space. And when we took office in 2017, and remember, I think we are in the same club, you know, trade ministers. I have been there before, and so I know about GCNet, and I knew about the destination inspection companies. But I was surprised to find out when I took office in 2017 that this multiplicity of service providers still existed. And in addition to GCNet and West Blue, you had 4 others, bringing the total to 6 service providers who were providing different types of services. Now, the fact that these service providers are using digital platforms that do not speak to each other, obviously, it cannot generate maximum operational efficiency. And so I took a bold decision that we needed, for once in our country, to put in place a comprehensive, fully integrated, end-to-end trade facilitation system that will do a number of things. Provide operational efficiency for imports and for exports. Secondly, to enhance revenue mobilization. Also, deepen our security arrangements for both exports and then imports. And so we went through the public procurement process, and then we selected a company that is a local company, but that is working together with the Korean Customs Service to deploy a new technology called Unipass. And in spite of all the noise and the negative comments about this bold effort that we took, the statistics now is clear about the value of this new intervention. And with your indulgence, I'll just give you just a few numbers. Now, the Unipass, or the Ghana rendition of it, which is called ICOMS, Integrated Customs Management System. Now, this ICOMS was fully deployed in June 2020, when a lot of noise was being made. Now, in July, that's after only 1 month.
You mean controversy? You mean controversies are surrounding the change in initiative?
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
You were saying noise. I thought you wanted controversy to better fit the situation.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yes, controversy surrounding the introduction of the Unipass.
Chairman, so that the nominee is not equating public protests and legitimate civil society concerns as noise. That's what the deputy leader wants him to avert his mind to.
Okay, very well.
But whilst at it there, is there an action for judgment debts? Is it the case that government owes West Blue for non-payment of its services? Thank you, Chair.
Respectfully, Honorable Leader, I think it is appropriate that I put it in the right context. So I'm saying that after the first month of deployment in July, there was an increase of 23% over the previous year, 2019. This is against the background that we were in the heart of the COVID experience, which obviously then meant that there was a lot of trade disruption. In the second month, in August, there was a 31% increase. In September, 34%. In October, 34%. In November, 25%. In December, 19%. So, Mr. Chairman, how is it that a system that had been described in very negative terms could, upon deployment, immediately increase our revenue mobilization to start? It's never happened in this country before.
Minister, it's not about increases in volumes of trade and volumes of what was imported.
No, it's
a function of CIF, many of it. I'm saying that 2019, for you to take note, there was no COVID in 2019. So you probably will be referring to 2020 figures. But I get your percentages, 23, 31, 34%. But I'm saying that couldn't it be a function of volumes?
Respectfully, Minority Leader, COVID was in 2020, and I'm suggesting to you that with the decrease in the volume of trade, you could not expect logically that you would have increased volumes and by extension increased value. This is, I think, logic. So the 2019 figures I'm referring to is a basis for comparing the deployment of the system in 2020 as against 2019, where you had the system you were referring to, GCNet, West Blue, and all these other. I think it's material information. Now, if you add the differences in accumulation or escalation of revenue mobilization, you are talking about just within a period of, is it 6 months? That's from July to December. We earned more than 1.6 billion Ghana cedis. How does a system that does not work in 5 or 6 months generate additional 1.6 billion in revenue? Something that has not happened before in our country. So I think that this is a material fact, but I can now go on.
Chair, with your leave, Honorable Nominee. So, from what you just saying, the figures you just given out, your suggestion is that, but for COVID, the figures would have even gone higher.
Exactly so. Mr. Chairman, I'll now proceed to respond to the issue of potential judgment debt. And again, it's a serious matter that he has raised. And I need to give you the historical background. And that's the only way you can explain whether there's the potential for judgment debt or not. Now, the original agreement between the government of Ghana and GCNet was signed on the 2nd of October 2000. But this agreement did not become effective until around 2003. Now, the agreement provided for a 10-year period of service provision. So that was supposed to take us from 2003 to 2013. Now, before the expiration of the agreement in 2013, there was a first supplemental agreement, which was signed on the 26th of August 2013, giving an extension of 5 years to the service provider, the GCNet. So, ostensibly, this supplemental agreement was supposed to end in 2018. Strangely enough, in October 2016, 2 months before the end of the term of office of the previous government, 2 clear years before the expiration of this agreement, first supplemental agreement, because it was supposed to end in 2018. There was a second supplemental agreement signed on the 28th of October 2016, extending an unexpired term of an agreement for a further 5 years to end in 2023. Obviously, this calls for some kind of inquiry. An agreement that has 2 years unexpired term is now extended for a further 5 years from the time that it is supposed to end in future, to 2023. So, on assumption of...
But you can keep it there. I should understand that if you have your copy of that agreement with you, which was signed in August, I should recall that I facilitated the first part of it, but in the extension, I said 10 years, but after 5 years, subject to an assessment. You don't find that in that agreement? It was there.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, in what you are holding, we said that if you pursued it for those number of years, renewal was only subject to an assessment. And I recall bringing in some experts from Belgium to have examined the whole GC net trade facilitation regime. But it's intriguing, the details that you have shared. But I'm saying that go more into the agreement that you signed. There was a condition that it should be subjected to an assessment for an extension. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Member. That is not in dispute. But I am submitting that after the assessment has been made and you make a decision that you would extend it, it is strange that 2 years on an unexpired term of an agreement, you extend it for a further 5 years. So the issue that you are advancing is not in contention about the fact that an assessment had to be made. And the assessment was made. So
Mr. Chair,
I think that's not the issue.
Nominee, so was the extension done before the assessment? The extension, was it done before the assessment?
I would suppose that it was done after the assessment.
Chairman, I'm just putting it on the record. If you read the 2013 agreement, it was extended for 10 years. So 2013 for 10 years would have been 2023. But there was a provision in the agreement which said that because technology changes very fast, after 5 years into the agreement, you renew subject to an assessment. I just wanted that to be part of the record. And if you doubt it, you can refer to the agreement that you are holding, that there was dedicated provision for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just also to put it on record, that there's no dispute about the requirement for assessment. I was just saying that if you have an unexpired term of 2 years on an agreement, and you give an extension of 2 years after the term of expiration, which is in the future, it's an interesting case in law. That's all that I'm saying. But let's escalate the matter. So here we are. We come into office in 2017. Now we realize that the supplemental agreement that was signed, both the first and the second, to all intents and purposes ought to be construed as international agreements. Because SGS, which is the majority shareholder of GCNet, it's a foreign company and has majority shares in the GCNet. And so there was a requirement in law for that supplemental agreement, both the first and the second, to have been submitted to Parliament, and that was not done. Secondly, Article 11.3 of the original agreement signed in 2000 that I referred to granted government the right to early termination, which is a standard clause in many.
Was the 2000 agreement submitted to Parliament for approval?
No, because at that time, that provision in law was...
No, I just want to know, was the 2000 agreement brought to Parliament? Thank you.
There was no requirement, yes. So, based on these two factors, the agreement, the two supplemental agreements themselves are void in law. And so, under normal circumstances, we ought not even to have operationalized the agreement. But basically, that was history. But for us to proceed then on the basis, having found out the shortcoming, and to continue with that in itself will be further violating the law. And as I said also, the provisions of the original agreement gives the right of government to early termination upon the payment of appropriate compensation, as every agreement provides. So, if GCNet or West Blue, as the honorable member was referring to, decides to go to court, we'll be ably represented there, and we'll look at the merits of the case.
Yes, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations to my boss, the honorable nominee. You gave me my first political appointment as your PA, and I will eternally be grateful for this opportunity. You have done a lot as the Minister for Trade, one district, one factory, implementation of AFTA, among many things. I, however, have an instruction from the Ejuso Traditional Council to bring a matter to your kind notice. And it's to do with the encroachment of free zones enclave in the Ejuso area. And I wish to demonstrate that on the, please, the second one. The second one, before this one. Good. So, sir, this is 1,090 acres of land that was given to free zones sometime in 2002. Unfortunately, 18 years on, not much has been done there, and people have been building. So, all the dotted areas represent, no, go back, please. All these areas represent different structures that people have put on there. The colors represent different levels of construction, from completion to lintel to foundation. Now, when we worked, it's about 1/3 of the total area. And I've been asked to bring to your notice and seek your comment on the matter. Respectfully, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I fully understand the position that the honorable member finds himself, being the newly elected member of parliament for that particular constituency which falls in that traditional area, that you will bring this concern of the people of the traditional area to our notice, particularly to the notice of this honorable house. Mr. Chairman, the problem of encroachment is a major one, not only for the free zones land, but as we know, all over Ghana. Now, our view is that there are a number of options to deal with encroachment. First, you can erect physical structures around the particular property to limit the potential for encroachment. Now, we are talking about an acreage of over 1,000 acres. So although that is a possibility, the expense involved is significant. And so that has been a major concern to the Ghana Free Zones Authority, limiting the use of that option. The second option is to admit that the encroachment has already taken place and to then regularize the actions of the encroachers and then cede the encroached acreage to the encroachers upon payment of compensation, appropriate compensation to those who were already on the land. We've looked at that option. we have not totally discounted that, but we've also not taken a firm decision on that matter because this is public land. And for whatever reason, it is strange that for the project that was to be executed for that traditional area, that you have residents within that area who would then do such a thing as encroaching on those lands. But as I said, it's already happened, and we are investigating that. When the Free Zones Authority realized the extent of the encroachment, they engaged the services of a surveyor to assess the extent of the encroached area so that an appropriate decision will be taken. Now, I'm just basically to end on this note that we feel that the way forward is to accelerate the development that is intended on the proposed site, and that automatically then also serves as another option of warding away encroachers. And we are continuously engaging with the chiefs and people of Ejiso to sensitize them on the need for the traditional rulers and then the people of Ejiso themselves to protect that property. So basically, it's not being left in abeyance. It's a matter that is being seriously addressed. So, Honorable Member, I think you can convey this to the traditional rulers. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much.
Honorable Minister, I want to follow up on this one. I've been actively involved in it from the beginning, when I was at DVLA, became a member of Parliament, Committee on Roads and Transport. We visited it. Let's be clear. Does the Ministry of Trade wish to do anything on that site? It's been 19 years. There's a conflict of the personal needs versus the public need. Does the Ministry of Trade or Free Zones Board wish to do anything on the land? And when are they going to do it?
Honorable Chair, I agree with you with the sentiments that you have on this matter. But I think you would appreciate that this matter is similar to other cases around the country where pieces of land have been acquired by government, in some cases through compulsory acquisition, but they have not been developed for that purpose. Multiple cases. The problem has always been a question of resources, because all over the world we know that industrial enclaves or industrial zones or industrial parks are a major instrument for industrialization. So it is perfectly in order and it is appropriate for government to acquire or develop land banks. We talk about this all the time, to develop land banks that can now then become available to potential investors. But the point is that once you acquire the piece of land, you pay compensation, and it's a lot of money. And now you have to develop the land. And so it has purely been a question of resources. But that has informed the new policy that I have adopted on assumption of office in the first term of the MPP government, that it is not sustainable for government to continue through the free zones to be acquiring land banks when they do not have the capacity to mobilize resources to develop these lands, as the current matter before us speaks to. And so our position now is that let's provide incentives for private sector developers to engage in the exercise of developing these land banks, and then government supports them to ensure that they survive. So this is currently the policy, but this is an old acquisition.
Chairman, if the nominee, back to this, if you have the Constitution with you, Article 25 and 6, let it guide you with what Chairman said. You acquired it for a certain purpose. Is it being used for that purpose? If it is not being used, let it revert back to the original owners. That's what the Constitution provides for. And what you've lost out already, count it as lost. Put what is remaining into use. And my view is that industrial park, you can start developing it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For want of time, I didn't want to veer into other areas that we are working on. But again, when I talk about our industrial transformation agenda, it's not just 1D1F, and so fortunate people just only refer to 1D1F. But another key pillar of this transformation agenda is to develop industrial parks around the country. We call it the One Region, One Park. And as I said, this is in collaboration with the private sector. So as I speak now, this land in question that the minority leader is referring to has now been incorporated into a new project, which is called the Greater Kumasi Industrial City and Economic Zone, which is a 4,500-acre initiative to be developed by private sector and government, and which will now incorporate the land under question. And this is going to be the next major industrial enclave after Tema. Because let's understand that the Ashanti region, and for that matter, that center where it's being developed this as an industrial, connects 6 or 7 regions in Ghana. Greater Accra, Ashanti region, Western North, part of Central region, part of Eastern region. Is also the transit corridor to the Sahelian countries. So we cannot be concentrating our industrial agenda only in Accra and Tema. So this major initiative would now incorporate this site under question. So it's very much along the lines that the minority leader is referring to. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman, let me convey the assurances of the Ejoso Traditional Council that we are firmly behind you on these projects and we want to see the project going on. But the opportunity calls for the delayed takeoff of these projects. And I'm happy that you have referred to the 4,500 acres in the Greater Kumasi area for the industrial city, which also happens to be in the Ejoso constituency. The delayed takeoff has resulted in the denial of legal rights of the local people to even farm on these lands. How soon are we likely to see companies setting up at the free zones enclave to provide jobs and industrial opportunities for the communities?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I do not want to give a specific answer in terms of time, but I'm sure the Honorable Member of Parliament has just taken office. If he consults with the traditional leaders, and then also we would be glad and pleased to work with him so that we can get some certainty in terms of timelines. Because as I've explained, this is not about government. This is about government facilitating and providing incentives to the private sector to undertake this project. So as I speak now, engineering designs have been conducted. All the site plans and the environmental assessment is being done. So a lot of work is being done. This is going to be one of the biggest projects to be implemented in terms of industrial activity in our country. So obviously it takes time. And we are also working on the mobilization of resources to pay for compensation. So it's work in progress.
Finally.
And it's been part of the budget statement, I think, in the last year. Thank you.
Finally, the industrial, and I want to assure my boss that I'm ever ready to partner with him to carry out this program. Industrial city projects and economic zones come with provision of certain amenities like water, extension of electricity, and good roads, especially within the enclave. So far, all the allocations that we have there, the 1,090, there's a second diagram which talks about the greater Kumasi area. This is almost about the 4,500 acres you spoke about. And then also the 400 acres for Buankra Inland Port. They do not have the social amenities I referred to, like water, good roads, and electricity, which of course will serve as incentive for potential investors into those areas. Please, can we have your assurance that we are going to have an extension of the supply of these amenities onto these allocations? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. You have the assurance, Honorable Member, and I think this is basic project development. You cannot talk about such a big project without providing off-site infrastructure. So the engineering studies that I'm talking about has actually been in respect the off-site infrastructure. The off-site infrastructure includes extending water, electricity, telecommunication services. All those things are part of the off-site infrastructure. And the last mile infrastructure will then be undertaken by the anchor tenants who come into the industrial city. And so I think it goes without saying that a big project like this has to have all the amenities for it to succeed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Nilante.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairman. Honorable nominee, first let me ask you, what is your position on green industry and the advantages involved in this, and what is Ghana's policy on the green industry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to be sure that I heard the Honorable Member right. Is it green industry? Yes, thank you. Mr. Chairman, as we know, globally, the world is going green, and we are following that developmental trajectory and that development path. And we are working in collaboration with other sector ministries to ensure that we also go green in terms of our industrialization plan and efforts. But to a large extent, because we are driving a policy and program that is supporting the private sector, to intervene in these areas, and not government itself making the investments. It also, to a large extent, depends on what we are discussing with our private sector collaborators. But as part of the environmental assessment that is done, that is a major part of what the industrial transformation plan calls for. And it's in all areas, including green energy and other aspects of the green, I would say, green revolution. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman, there's a huge money out there in that industry, so I will plead that Honorable Nominee and I sat in a meeting at the AU on this particular issue, and I'm surprised up to now we have not really taken steps to see how we can get something out of this. But my second, which is also on a decision that has been taken, there has been advocacy for the setting up of a common West African shipping line to facilitate trade on the basis of the aviation industry, ASCA, and financial industry, Ecobank, and the rest. What is your take on this, and how far have the West African countries and the trade ministers taken this particular decision, and what is Ghana's take on it?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'm happy you've raised, the Honourable Member has raised this particular point, because part of the challenge that we've had with ECOWAS trade is moving goods across our borders, both in terms of ease of movement and then also freight costs. And we all know that shipping is probably the best way forward if you want to move goods in significant volumes. And so the challenge of developing shipping interconnectivity between our West African countries has always been on the drawing board. And as trade ministers, we've been working kindly with a private sector group in which the chambers of commerce are very actively involved to be able to develop this shipping, ECOWAS shipping network. My understanding is that the major challenge has been a question of resources, but it's on the drawing board. And now that we are talking about going beyond ECOWAS to the rest of Africa, it becomes even more critical, because according to the protocols underpinning AFTA, you can use raw materials from your sub-region, because the regional economic communities are still existing within the belly of the AFTA. So it is important and appropriate for us to now ensure that this regional shipping network becomes a reality. It is not going to be just the governments of West Africa, but then I think more importantly, the private sector with the support from development finance institutions like African Development Bank and then the ECOWAS Bank for Development. But I can assure you that it's a matter that is still under very serious consideration. I'm sure when you were at the ministry, you were also apprised of this. Yes. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, now to something that touches my heart, because I'm the member of Parliament for Dodo. Retail trade and the constant friction between Guta and foreigners in our retail trade sector. And one of the most serious ones we've seen recently is a tendency for foreigners to take advantage of our GIPC law, get married to Ghanaians in order to own shops within the retail market space to avoid the, let me say, the scrutiny of Guta and other Ghanaian institutions that monitor these things. What are we going to do to ensure that we respect the protocols that demand that when it comes to retail trade is a preserve of nationals and indigents
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, the issue of foreigners in domestic retail trade is obviously a very vexed one. And it's been going on for decades. What the ministry has done is to take a firm position on the matter that according to the laws of our country, there are certain enterprises or activities that are currently reserved for Ghanaians, and it's clearly specified under the GIPC Act. Now, the lack of enforcement of the provisions of the GIPC Act is what has led to this tension that continues to exist between foreign traders and then, let's say, Guta and other traders in Ghana. Now, beyond the provisions of the GIPC Act, there are also several provisions in different enactments that have to be respected, whether you're a Ghanaian or a foreigner, and you want to engage in retail trade. The challenge that we've had is that even if the provision in the GIPC Act was waived, I'm saying even if it was waived for a variety of reasons, there's still a requirement for foreigners engaged in retail trade to abide by the laws of Ghana. And so what has occurred is the abuse of these laws and regulations. I mean, whether it's immigration laws, whether laws relating to revenue, GRE regulations, or even regulations in respect of business operating licenses that is under the authority of our metropolitan and district assemblies. We cannot have a situation in a country where Ghanaians are compelled by these regulatory authorities to abide by these laws. And then we turn around, to ignore when these same rules are being violated by foreigners. And I think it is important for us also to make note of the fact that it is not about targeting specific nationals, particularly in West Africa. We are talking about foreigners in retail trade. And so, because of the tension that has arisen over the years, we have had very serious consultations between our various countries, and then even at the level of Ecowas. And we've agreed that foreigners who want to engage in retail trade in Ghana must go by the laws of our country. I know that issues have been raised in respect of conflict between provisions in the Ecowas protocol and then our domestic law. But the law is clear on this. And as I indicated, even if that requirement of the GIPC was waived, the other regulations have to be respected. What I can say in conclusion, though, is that in order to ensure that we maintain our long-standing bonds of friendship and economic engagement, particularly with our neighbors in West Africa, that we've taken a position that in all cases where there are violations of these provisions, that we must make sure that we engage and consult with each other rather than take arbitrary actions. So that has been the position.
Chairman, I've finished, but let me
You're
also
done.
inform the honorable nominee that in looking at that angle, I think he must engage more because now the Chinese have virtually taken over the market
After
in
we
Accra.
approve him, then you can have a private chat with him. Yes, leader, I thought you...
Chairman, thank you. Honorable Minister, let me commend you. Join earlier speakers. Relative question asked by the Honorable Neil van der Poel. And I recognize that you've taken the trouble to run us through the existence of the law and all that. Recent times, we've experienced a situation where there was near, or even exchanges, clashes between our nationals and other foreign nationals. Then, all of a sudden, it's been quiet. I think it's been on and off. But I believe this didn't just happen. Are you able to apprise this committee some concrete measures, however temporary they are, that this government, led by your good self, has been able to undertake to restore the seeming quietness?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We, as I indicated, have in particular made an effort to consult with our friends, particularly in Nigeria, in Togo and Benin, about finding ways of addressing these issues that are under reference. We also had a delegation from the Parliament of Nigeria that visited, and we had consultations and engagement with them. So the point that I would like to stress is that the consultations and the engagement that have been led by the ministry under the leadership of our president is what has made it possible for us not to sweep the matter under the carpet, but to bring the tension down. And that is how come you see that the tension is not as intense as they were. Yeah.
Yes, don't worry.
The Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement and the implications opening up our market. Have we taken advantage of the institutions, policies, and systems to build local industries that can produce competitively, to be able to take advantage of this continental free trade arrangement that we are putting in place, particularly Exim Bank that we established, Ghana Exim Bank. How have we, over the 4 years during which you were Minister for Trade and Industry, used the resources there to support efficient local industries to be able to produce for export? Do you monitor industries to be able to assess those that are doing well, that the state should provide support to become big producers for export so that they can compete with the imports that are creating problems for us in our markets?
Thank you, Chair. Honorable Member, I had earlier on made reference to a variety of industrial activities and interventions that the government has been engaged in, all designed to promote and support our local businesses. First, to be able to import substitute or produce for the local market, but more importantly, also to be able to export. So I've gone through this earlier on extensively, whether it's under the One District, One Factory program, or whether it is support at the district level through our business resource centers. But beyond this general program of industrialization, with the coming into force of AFTA, African Continental Free Trade Area, we've established a national office that is currently implementing a national program of action, specifically targeting companies that can produce competitively for the export market, particularly in Africa, but also for Europe and the United States, because we have duty-free and quota-free access to these markets also. Now, these program interventions are supposed to cover a variety of areas. One is enhancing productive capacity. Second is ensuring that there's access to affordable credit, that's working with the financial institutions and banks. The other is also identifying specific market information about market opportunities in different countries. The other relates to ensuring that we provide technical assistance for quality and standards. We are also supporting them in terms of human resource capacity building. Going into exports is difficult, and we are doing that also to enhance their capacity to export. I made reference earlier on, I'm not sure if you were here, that we have a program that is targeting companies that are already exporting to Africa. So these are low-hanging fruits. So we do a needs assessment of these companies so that we can have a targeted program that helps them to enhance their current levels of production. But there are others that are not exporting to Africa, but exporting to other parts of the world. So we are guiding them also now to be able to also identify opportunities for the African market. So a lot is going on, and sometimes it's difficult to have the opportunity to talk about everything.
Nominee doesn't know Honorable Muntaka is here. When you give an elaborate answer, he takes a note and to come in cross-examination. So he says today is Friday, he doesn't want to do his usual thing. So if you give very short answers, we'll have few questions for you. Yeah. He says if you give an elaborate answer, he will take notes.
Honorable, I thought you were going to ask a question. Yes, Honorable.
Yeah, Honorable nominee and former Minister for Trade and Industry. Now, the issue with exports and imports and local production to substitute imports really is underlined by price. At what price are importers, the goods that are being imported, at what price is it being produced in the country of export, okay? And then at what price is the same good being produced here? Then you add tax and etc. to get whether or not the products will be competitive here. Now, do you have a mechanism for taking items and analyzing critically the inputs and trying to deal with the inefficiencies in the price buildup for the production of those items? Let's take, for instance, rice. We're importing, close to 1 million or more metric tons of rice every year. And then we're talking about producing rice locally. But if you compare the unit cost of production in Thailand you compare the unit cost of production in Ghana, unless you deal with the inefficiencies in the price buildup in terms of the unit cost of production, you can never be competitive. So somebody will still produce in Thailand, ship it, come here, still handle logistical costs, and still be able to outcompete the local producer of rice here, because he has a price buildup that is just inefficient by imposed fertilizer pricing, by imposed chemical pricing, by all sort of impositions that just produces an inefficient production cost. As a ministry, do you have a strategy for a more detailed work on production cost? Because I've been at the ministry before as a deputy minister. All the things that you are saying today, we said it at that time, and etc. But the key thing is to zero in on specific items you are producing and the efficiency of what you're doing, and ultimately the price of the item. How are you able to deal with that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, we have a very comprehensive program of support to our enterprises that we support. And the services are not provided by staff of the ministry. We engage technical experts in many cases that would interrogate the areas that we've identified, that would examine areas that lead to cost buildup and operational inefficiency. So our team of experts and consultants are doing exactly what you're saying. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Honorable Yabon.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Minister, congratulations. Let's move into the area of the automotive industry. Can I proceed, please?
Yeah.
Very well. Late last year, you introduced to this economy an automotive industry policy. And subsequent to that, there were some ensuing controversies between government and vehicle importers, garage owners, and I have a lot of them in my constituency, the Europas of the world. We've seen that a lot of huge companies in the automotive industry have decided to set up here as a result of the policy you ushered into being: Peugeot, Nissan, VW, etc. What is the status of this laudable program in the face of these challenges from our local industry players in that sector? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, the implementation of the automobile development policy has undoubtedly yielded very positive results, and I think I do not need to speak to that. But it is clear that there has been some misunderstanding between different stakeholders about the impact and the effect of this policy on their businesses. First is in respect of what has been described in the policy and the Customs Amendment Law as salvage vehicles. Reference has also been made to the issue of overage, importation of overage vehicles. And regrettably, there was a lot of controversy that had been generated over this. But I'd like to assure this House that there is really no need for that tension to arise for a number of reasons. Because if you look at the provisions of the Customs Amendment Act, which refers to salvage vehicle, unfortunately, the law did not specify what is described as physical damage or wreckage. I don't need to get into the details of the law. But we explained to the stakeholders that there will be the need for regulations to be put in place that will further define the implementation arrangements of what is in the law. And I think that to a large extent, the industry players have now come to appreciate and understand that there's really no threat to the businesses that they are undertaking. And that, in actual fact, they stand to benefit from the development of the auto industry in Ghana in a variety of ways. So whether it's the issue of salvage vehicles or the issue of overage cars, we've come to a common understanding with the industry players that in some cases there's a specific requirement that it is only when the Minister of Trade advises the Minister of Finance that certain provisions of the law would kick in. And so it still lies in the bosom of the ministry. And we continuously engage with the industry players to ensure that the implementation of the provisions of this law does not negatively affect their business.
I'm happy the Georgia and Co, the garage owners in my constituency will be happy. Mr. Minister, last year you also saw into being the Enterprise Ghana Agency Act 2020. The economy is largely informal, and it's made up of a lot of micro, small, and medium enterprises, NBSSI, the Maslows of the world. How does this link with your 10-point industrial transformation plan for this country, with the BRCs and under the Rural Enterprise Program? Thank you. That's my last question, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, one of the 10 pillars of our industrial transformation agenda is the development of micro, small, and medium enterprises. And so under this component, we've introduced a number of interventions. One is the transformation of MBSSI to strengthen their organizational and management capacity, and also to resource them to be able now to ensure that they are able to efficiently perform their role as an apex body for MSMEs. So part of it was developing the MSME policy to support the transformation of MBSSI. Secondly, as you alluded to, now we've expanded the scope of MBSSI and their reach into the districts with the establishment of the business resource centers, which are under the supervision and oversight of MBSSI. And so to a large extent, the MBSSI is going to become a reformed organization so that they can deepen their support to MSMEs. As you rightly indicated, over 90% of our enterprises belong to that category, and we needed a transformed organization to be able to support these enterprises.
Samuel Kujat.
Most grateful, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, let me congratulate the nominee and indicate that though I do not know how long he will stay at the ministry before he resigns to run for president, I certainly wish him well. The first question is to seek the nominee's reflections on the exciting times in international trade following the emergence of the first African and first female Director General of the World Trade Organization, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. Many trade followers in Ghana had thought that if there would be a first African Director General, it would be the Venerable John Allan Kwejo Kyerematen. But Nigerians are good cousins, and so it is well in order, and we are all excited about this development. And we congratulate Dr. Okonjo-Iweala. But the question is, this is happening at a time that we are at the forefront of establishing the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. How do you think that Africa, and for that matter Ghana, which is hosting the AFTA Secretariat, can leverage this exciting development at the WTO? The new Director General has said that she would pursue deep reforms. She would address matters to do with protectionism, subsidies, and all the bilateral trade wars that are going on that leaves underdeveloped countries as the victims of all of these power play in rich economies. How do you think that Ghana can leverage this development, the first African Director General, with our AFTA agenda to expand the frontiers of fair trade for the benefit of our economies and to yield to job creation as we seek a rebound from the effect of COVID-19?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, as the Honourable Member has very aptly described the WTO, the main objective of the WTO is to expand the frontiers of free trade. And to a large extent, that's the same objective of the African Continental Free Trade Area, to expand the frontiers of free trade in Africa by liberalizing tariffs and then also ensuring the free flow of goods and services between our African countries. So to a large extent, we are working towards the same objective. And in that regard, having an African as the Director General of the WTO provides an opportunity for us in Africa, whilst we embark on this major initiative of liberalizing trade between ourselves, how we use our collaboration between ourselves as a launching pad to enhance our participation in the global market, which is superintended by the WTO. So basically, if we can deepen our trade under AFTA amongst ourselves, that will then become a launching pad for us to increase our presence in global trade. And I think that once you have a fellow African, I mean, it can only be to advantage. So we hope we can fully use that opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
As by way of quick follow-up, has...
Honourable members, today we will want to close early, so do your second one, please. I announced at the beginning, and we'll be smart today, so please, your second question.
My second question, Mr. Chairman, will relate to a rather tragic development that occurred when the Honourable nominee was Minister. Tragic for local business and local initiative, local industries. On the 16th of February, a Sunday, 16th of February 2020, at midnight, the Ghana Trade Fair Company Limited, which is one of the institutions you supervise, it's under your ministry, carried out a demolition of some 28 companies at the trade fair. The managers of these companies indicate that they were taken by surprise, they were not notified. National security operatives are said to have carried out the demolition. I have the pictures of the demolition here. You see machinery, valuable equipment, and office accessories, all destroyed in the demolition. Can you tell us the circumstances of this demolition? Did you authorize it as sector minister? And don't you think that that is a blight on your reputation as champion of Ghanaian industries?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. I think it's unfortunate that we have people who used to be tenants on the property of the Ghana Trade Fair Authority who have been affected by this redevelopment exercise. But as you are aware, the Trade Fair Authority is a private company, although government has had full shareholding in the company. It has a board. The board took a decision that for the redevelopment exercise to go on smoothly, it required the evacuation of tenants from the site. And the relevant notices, as far as I'm reliably informed, had been given to the tenants over a 3-year period. And like with any major development project, you have a critical path that you follow in terms of project execution. And so the continued stay of the tenants was inhibiting progress in the development of the site. And basically the board took a decision that once notices had been given over an extended period of time, that they'll go ahead with the demolition exercise. We intervened at a point to see whether there was some arrangement that could be made to extend the time for them to be able to find alternative locations. And in actual fact, I am aware that the tenants were given some extension in terms of time. But as I said, with project development, it comes to a point where the execution requires you to take certain actions. So that's what I can say about this. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman, I move to my third question, just to indicate that this sudden announcement of no follow-ups is constraining. The Honorable John Kuma had follow-ups. I don't know why I cannot have follow-ups. I will take up this matter when we go into concrete. Mr. Chairman,
you know, I have been very liberal.
No, but I don't think on this instance you are being fair to me.
Do early. Kindly do your third one.
I will place on record that you have not been fair to me, because these are important issues.
Keep that record to yourself.
What did Mr. Chairman? My third question, official report of Parliament. The last time this House discussed the 1D, 1F flagship initiative. At column 787 and 788, when you briefed this House on the status of the 1D, 1F program, you provided the regional breakdown of 1D, 1F interventions across the various regions. Parliament did raise concern about the unfair distribution. If I would have to make reference to the table you provided, the Upper East region did not have a single 1D, 1F project, zero. Upper West had only one. Western region had only one. Volta region had only one. We did request that you consider a fair distribution of this 1D, 1F intervention. My question is, did you respectfully carry out this observation and concern that Parliament expressed? And can you give us the current breakdown of the 1D, 1F initiatives across the 16 regions of Ghana?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, in an earlier question posed by the minority leader, I had indicated that, unfortunately, I do not have the regional breakdown. But I can assure you that the position is better now than the time that I made this representation to this House. Thank you.
Yeah. Very well. There.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Honorable Nominee. My question has to do with the automobile industry. And we get the sense that Ghana is positioning itself as the automobile assembly hub for West Africa. Would you be able to tell us the level of local content in terms of involving Ghanaians in this industry to enable transferability of skills, which might eventually lead to Ghanaian ownership of some of these companies? Is there a plan towards ensuring that Ghanaians benefit from this industry? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Member, there are different ways that Ghanaians will be benefiting from this industry. The first and obvious one is through employment and skills development, because the majority of the people that will be employed will be Ghanaians, not just at the lower level, but also at the supervisory and managerial levels. Secondly, there's a significant opportunity for Ghanaians to also become dealers. Although initially the trend is for existing dealers who may not necessarily be Ghanaians, who are now the local partners of the, let's say, big automobile companies. We, as part of our policy, have insisted that we need to decentralize the dealership of these locally produced vehicles, particularly as you move out of Accra, Kumasi, and the big centers. So I think there's general agreement, and the current dealers who are working with the big companies themselves are very pleased about this, because they cannot overextend themselves to every part of the country. So if my very good friend, Honorable Ayariga, wants to take up the dealership for Volkswagen in the whole of the northern regions, obviously that becomes an opportunity, an economic opportunity. So that's another area that they will benefit. Another area that they will benefit is also in terms of component manufacturing. Because in the long run, when you assemble cars, you do not optimize your benefits until you start producing the component parts. And so we know that we have the capacity in this country, with the support of new technology, let's say to develop SWAMI, into a major component manufacturing hub. And we've had discussions with the global companies that are already showing up in this country. And they are very excited because the closer you are to your components for the assembly, the cheaper and more efficient it is for you. So they are very interested in supporting local content, not just in terms of employment, but in terms of component assembly. Thank you.
Yeah, my second question is back to one district, one factory. You just described it as a revolution, and we think the initiative was looking at restructuring the Ghanaian economy to make it more local-based. With hindsight, will you say that in an effort to cover the entire districts in this country within 4 years was a little bit overly ambitious? And whether you didn't consider staggering the projects so that you scale them up as we went along? Or maybe that consideration, political considerations, overwhelm some of these other considerations. With hindsight, what your thoughts be on the manner in which the one district, one factory was implemented? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam, Mr. Chairman. Honorable Member, I can understand why, from a conceptual point of view, this might have sounded a bit ambitious, that you would want to have a factory in every district. But I think the philosophy underpinning this was not for government to be establishing these enterprises. This is designed to facilitate support to the private sector to establish these factories. So far, I think there's been overwhelming interest and support for this. So, in a sense, I do not think that, on hindsight, that we were being impractical or over-ambitious. However, I would also agree with you that there are certain parts of the country where we may not necessarily be able to attract private investors in establishing 1D, 1F companies. So in those districts, government has made it a policy that government will intervene directly and incubate some of these enterprises, and then later on offload that to the private sector if it becomes necessary. But I think the principle is that every district in Ghana deserves to have development. And all these districts have natural resources that can be developed. We need employment around the country. So it may be an ambitious target, but if you see what we've done so far, I think it is realizable. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Very well. Gisela. She's not ready. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honorable nominee, I'd like to ask you about the Ecowas single currency program, which has been with us for a very long time. I mean, this is a program intended to remove trade barriers, reduce transaction costs, and to boost economic activities within the sub-region. But year in, year out, what we hear is that X number of countries have met the convergence criteria. And then at another time, you'd hear that the figure has changed. As Minister for Trade, you've been there for 4 years. What are the reasons militating against the adoption of an Ecowas single currency? And if given the nod, what critical role do you think Ghana can play to ensure that the Ecowas single currency project comes to fruition?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I think in principle, we all agree that a common currency in ECOWAS will enhance trade between our countries. And that's why all the governments have pursued vigorously this initiative. Unfortunately, if you look at the convergence criteria, it is not altogether surprising that we've not been able to move forward to achieve our objective, because it's very difficult to be able to get all countries achieve the convergence criteria at the same time. I think that going forward, if we look at what is being done under the AFCFTA, whilst we still hope that we would eventually have the benefit of a common currency, whether it is for ECOWAS or for Africa under AFTA. There's a new initiative which is pioneered by the Afri-Exim Bank, which is called the Payment Settlement Mechanism. And that allows every state party or traders in a state party to be able to use their local currency to trade. That's to, let's say, if they're importing, to import goods from another African country without the benefit of a common currency, which was really the objective of standardizing the medium of exchange. So this payment settlement mechanism, when it is fully activated, at least temporarily, would still facilitate trade as was intended by the common currency, whilst we hopefully work towards achieving that goal one day. As you know, even in Europe, it took quite a bit of time for the euro to become a reality. But it's a target I think we'll still work towards it.
Thank you. Honorable nominee, this afternoon you've spoken extensively about the African Continental Free Trade Area, and we won the bid to host the Secretariat here in Accra. We're all very excited about the prospects of the African Continental Free Trade Area, but I have reservations. Why? Because we've lived with ECOWAS since the early 70s, and ECOWAS was supposed to guarantee for us a common market, a free trade area within the West African sub-region. But these objectives have never materialized. And so, sometime last year, Nigeria, without any provocation, shut down their border at Seme. The shutdown of the border clearly affected Ghanaian businesses. I remember a delegation was sent there to inspect the damage that was caused. On the other hand, we are also being accused of not treating foreigners engaged in the retail trade in our country by member states within the ECOWAS sub-region. What is so unique about the African Continental Free Trade Area? And what do you think would make the African Continental Free Trade Area succeed, unlike its counterpart, ECOWAS?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, there are two fundamental components of the African Continental Free Trade Area, which hopefully will make it easier for us to trade amongst ourselves than has occurred within ECOWAS or the other regional economic communities. First is the fact that one of the protocols under AFTA, which we have negotiated, is the Protocol on Dispute Settlement. And Honorable Member, being a lawyer yourself, you would appreciate that when there are provisions of law that regulate the trade between, let's say, state parties, it becomes more difficult for people to flout or to, let's say, create artificial barriers, as has happened, let's say, in Ecowas. Because now, any trader in any state party that feels aggrieved by the action of another state party can file a complaint under the dispute settlement mechanism. And the cost associated with this dispute settlement is a very significant one. I'm taking a cue from what happens in the WTO. So I think it's a major component that distinguishes it from what we now have in Ecowas and other regs. The second one is a digital operational instrument that has been developed to, again, deal with some of the challenges that you alluded to. So this digital platform allows a trader, let's say that is moving goods from Ghana to Nigeria, again to file a complaint on the digital platform, giving specific details of that complaint. And then there are provisions that require the trader in the state party to address that challenge or bottleneck within a certain specified time. So I think that that would also help. I cannot guarantee that we'll eliminate all the barriers, but the protocols and the annexes that have been negotiated in this CFTA is very comprehensive, and I think that will probably make the difference. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Honorable nominee, this is my last question. You've also spoken about the vehicle assembly automotive policy, which was launched sometime in 2019. And the policy has so far yielded some results. So Volkswagen, Nissan, Toyota are coming into our country. But don't you think that this policy is going to suffocate local companies such as Kantanka, the Kantanka Group, which is an indigenous company involved in vehicle manufacture and assemblage?
Thank you, Chair. Honorable Chair, on the contrary, this particular policy is very supportive of local companies that will also seek to participate in the automotive industry. And just to be very specific, because you mentioned Kantanka, there are different grades of licenses that are given to these automobile companies. As I speak now, Kantanka has the highest level of certification. They have what we call an enhanced SKD certificate, so that they can do more than the other global players. And to testify to the importance of some of these provisions in the policy, Kantanka has doubled its production capacity since they were given a license to operate under the framework of the policy. So it is the other way around, and the appeal that we are making is that as many Ghanaians as possible ought to take advantage of this new development, because I can assure you that in the next couple of years, Ghana is going to become the new automotive manufacturing hub in Africa, because this is the first time that around the world you have a country that is now entering into this industry and has been able to attract all the major global players at the same time. You know, almost invariably, they will start with one company that comes in to test, you know, whether it is really something worthy. But to have Volkswagen, Toyota, Suzuki, Nissan, Isuzu, and very soon we are going to give also a pre-bona fide license to Hyundai and to Chang'an, you know, and Peugeot also will be participating later on in the year. I think this in itself, the matter speaks for itself, as we say in law.
Honourable members, we've done 2 hours. Let's stretch for some 10 minutes, then we'll come back, continue, please. Honourable, you can also stretch for 10 minutes. That's our instructions, protocol.
Work and nothing will be a distraction.
If you wish to answer, do so. If not, you may ignore it.
I will pass, Mr. Chairman.
You will pass the question?
Yes, that's my ruling. That is his choice, if he wishes to answer.
But my question is it true? And if it is, how is that going to affect your work?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, when I said I'll let it pass, I intended that no comment. Very well. Thank you for
No comment, as in you.
Yes, no comment.
You cannot agree with him or deny.
Thank you. You're done. You don't have any other
I will also
issue.
pass
Thank
to the
you.
next
You're
person.
done. Yes,
Honourable nominee.
Mr. Jari, you're done. Honourable Tosu, yes.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair. Honourable nominee, you've been the Minister for Trade and Industry for the last 4 years. A lot of activities have gone on. However, our trade balances have not been very, very impressive over the last 4 years. It's been reported that our trade deficit, our trade balance have been constantly reducing, and as of 2019, it has reduced to 0.39 B, which is a 151.14 decline from 2018 trade balance. Adding to that, our import bill has also increased. For example, it's been estimated that our Ghana's import bill exceeds $10 billion annually. And in 2018, the total import bill amounted to about $12 billion. What would you do to improve our trade balance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, by definition, if you want a positive trade balance, then you always have to be able to export more than you are importing. And in that regard, we have put in place with the under the direction of the Ghana Export Promotion Authority, which is one of the agencies under my ministry, a very comprehensive national export development strategy. In our view, this is charting a path for Ghana to put export at the center of our national development agenda. So I believe that the implementation of this strategy and implementation plan will help us reverse the statistics that you are referring to. Secondly, I've also made reference to a number of interventions, industrial interventions that are currently ongoing, including the new strategic anchor industries, 10 of them that are new pillars of growth that we are promoting to diversify the economy away from cocoa and gold. So if you add the one district, one factory to these 10 new strategic anchor industries, together with our business resource centers, together with our initiative on establishing industrial enclaves, all these are designed to promote exports in a country. And that's how you can reverse the imbalance in trade. Thank you.
So as a quick follow-up, are you assuring the committee that when approved...
That's your second question. So there are no follow-ups, please.
Very well, Chairman. So I will leave the follow-up then and go to the substantive second question. My second question has to do with the current status of the Commander Sugar Factory. As you are aware, the state invested about $37.82 million in this project. As long as the project remains unused or the project remains a white elephant, it is at a cost to the state. We have received a petition from, it's a joint petition from, I think, Ransford, Vani, and Alhaji Naziru, actually complaining about the abandoned Commander Sugar Factory. What is the current state of the Commander Sugar Factory, and how soon can we begin work?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, to respond to the question, I'd like just to give a little bit of background to the Commander Sugar Factory. In 2017, we inherited the Commander Sugar Factory with, I would say, some controversy hanging around it for a number of reasons. So in July 2017, the ministry established a technical audit team made up of experts from the industry to take a look at the state of the factory, to advise us on how to operationalize the factory. Because as we are aware, the factory itself was commissioned on the 30th of May, 2016, but it was never operationalized until we took over. So that was the purpose of the technical audit. In October, when we received the report of the technical audit, it indicated, among other things, that a full test run was never completed before the commissioning. And also, that at the time of commissioning, a number of critical parts for the factory had not been installed. So, for example, the industry has a standard practice. You need a crushing plant that crushes the sugar cane. You need what is called the horizontal crystallizer, and you need a vertical crystallizer. And it is only when you have this full complement of machinery and equipment that you can actually produce what is called white sugar or sulfurless white sugar. But at the time of commissioning, it was only the horizontal crystallizer that had been installed. And so technically speaking, it was going to be difficult for you, for the purposes of the test run and the commissioning, to produce white sugar. So what was produced from the test run ended at what comes out of the horizontal crystallizer, which is normally brown sugar. Now, be that as it may, we decided that we'll, through the oversight of the Senior Minister's Office, that a forensic audit be conducted to establish the facts about the construction of the factory and all the controversy that was surrounding it. Now, it came to the fore that a valuation that was conducted earlier on, which established the value of the company at $34 million. Later on the revaluation by Pricewaterhouse, which was the transaction advisor, actually established a much lower value. Now, in spite of this revelation, we still decided, as you're alluding to, that we should identify new strategic investors, because the effort that was made in 2016 to divest the shares unfortunately could not materialize. The company that was offered a bid could not perform the financial obligations on it. So PwC, we didn't want to change the transaction advisor. PwC continued with the exercise of identifying a new strategic investor. So this has gone on for some time. I mean, these things take time. It's detailed work that has to be done. So PwC finally went through the exercise, and a new company called Agrotech, was selected, and I think I made a report to Agrotech Ghana Limited. I made a report to Cabinet about the status of implementation of Commander. So Agrotech has been selected as the preferred bidder, but as is normally the practice, the transaction advisor then still has to go into further negotiations with the preferred bidder to arrive at a final settlement, on the basis of which the share and purchase agreement, or in this case, we elected for a concession agreement, will be finalized. So as I speak now, the concession agreement has been finalized. There are a few issues that are standing to be resolved between the transaction advisor and Agrotech. And then basically the company would then be handed over fully under concession agreement to Agrotech. But let me explain that whilst all this was going on, Early 2020, before COVID struck, Agrotech was going to bring in their technical experts to start looking at the plant and then also identify areas that needed to be, I would say, put into sound conditioning for the factory now to start working. But unfortunately, this did not happen because of the COVID pandemic. So as I speak now, as soon as the share and purchase agreement is fully executed, then the transaction will be closed and then they can start operating the factory. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And my very final question has to do with various reports of clashes between Nigerian retailers and Ghanaian. No, it hasn't been answered. My question. Yeah, Mr. Chair. Yes. So the question is, what measures are you taking to address the challenges of Ghanaian retailers and their Nigerian counterparts, given the fact that there is consistent clashes between these two people? When you come to Medina Market, which falls within my constituency, I've had several reports of those potential clashes. What is your ministry going to do to permanently resolve this matter?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, as I indicated earlier on, the ministry, working in collaboration with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, have engaged extensively with the GUTA, which is the Association for Ghanaian Traders, with the Nigerians. We've escalated this to the political level. We've met the Speaker of Parliament of Nigeria. They've had a delegation sent here. So we've had our consultations with them. I've had consultations with my counterpart in Nigeria and then also with the foreign minister in Nigeria. And we've agreed on a framework for engagement. And that is why you've seen that there seems to be some relatively calmness over the last couple of months. But I think I made an indication earlier on to a question, similar question, what the issues were. And so I think it's on record. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Honorable Sweeney.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Honorable nominee, in answer to my question, Mr. Chairman, which will be on trade fair, I would like the honorable nominee to demonstrate that he was fully in charge of the ministry and government's trade push, given that the government flagship program for trade, 1D1F Secretariat, was under the presidency, and the appointment of the CEO of Trade Fair was done by the Minister of Finance and not the Minister of Trade. So on those bases, I want to find out from the nominee if he was aware of the redevelopment plan for Trade Fair, which went through international competitive bidding under the watch of PricewaterhouseCoopers, which got cancelled by the CEO and re-awarded through suspicious tender processes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I got a little bit confused along the line when he introduced the element of 1D1F, particularly now that my understanding is that you are talking about the Ghana Trade Fair Authority.
Let's clarify it for him, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I said that in answering my question, I would want you to, first of all, demonstrate that you are fully in charge of the Ministry of Trade, given that government's flagship program, 1D1F, which was supposed to facilitate trade, was under the presidency. And also, given that the CEO of Trade Fair was appointed by the Minister of Finance and not the Minister of Trade. Then the question on trade fair, the question on trade fair then comes. So that is the basis upon which I made reference to the 1D1F. I hope you get the drift.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, in the first place, the oversight responsibility for the 1 factory was the Ministry of Trade and Industry. Secondly, also, I think you referred to the appointment letter of the Ghana Trade Fair Authority having been signed by the Minister of Finance. Unfortunately, I don't make the appointments to agencies under the ministries. So I unfortunately cannot respond to that. But again, in respect of the Trade Fair Authority, I think I've indicated earlier on that the Trade Fair Authority is an agent, it's a company, it's a private company registered under the Companies Code with a governing board. And so much as we have oversight responsibility for the company, there's still, in terms of management and operational decisions, that still lies in the bosom of the board and the management team. But I've already given a response to the issues that have developed in response of the evacuation of people from the site and some of the other issues that have arisen, including the redeployment of staff. So I'm not sure whether what you're asking.
I asked about the contract that was signed after an international bidding process, which got cancelled by the CEO, for another to be re-awarded to a company under suspicious tender processes. I asked if you are aware of it and if you, as supervising minister, sanctioned that.
I'm not directly supervising the award of contracts. As I said, these are operational issues that are under the direct supervision of the management and the board. I mean, that's basically the structure, even though it is basically a company that has affiliation with the ministry. In terms of management and operational decisions, it's the responsibility of the board and then the management team. Thank you.
Yes, I'll move to my second question, but just to state that I have a presentation that was done by Honorable Mrs. Gifty Ohene Kunedu, National Coordinator, 1 District 1 Factory, at which she stated that the Office of the President, the 1 District 1 Factory Secretariat, it's situated at the Office of the President. It's established to be under the Office of the President. But I'll move to my next question. The NBSSI, they already have existing business advisory centers that are stationed at the various district assemblies across the country. Now, with your introduction of the business resource centers, which you spoke of earlier when the Honorable Minority Leader engaged you, what is your plan with the two seemingly similar bureaucratic bodies? And would you also like to tell us how the consultants under the Business Resource Center are remunerated?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, you're absolutely right. There was an existing, I would say, structure which had business advisory centers, BACs, still under the oversight responsibility of the MBSSI. And this was being managed in collaboration with the district assemblies. However, in 2017, we decided that the REP, which is the Rural Enterprises Program, under which the BACs were established, needed to be realigned to the government's priorities. And so we agreed, together with IFAD and then the African Development Bank, that are the sponsors of the REP, that we needed to upgrade the BACs and provide them with the resources, both human resources and fiscal resources in terms of equipment, for them to be able to deliver on the comprehensive program of rural industrialization and providing support to MSMEs. So against that background, we introduced the concept of business resource centers, which simply is an upgrade of BACs. We haven't cancelled the BACs. So what we've done is that we've established the BRCs in certain districts, as I said, 67 districts, and they have oversight over a number of districts within an operational zone. So let's say a BRC in District A, because it is a more enhanced institutional infrastructure, would provide business development services to other districts within an operational zone, let's say maybe 4 or 5 districts. But then, because you have a limited number of BRCs, it means that if you have 260 districts, you will still not be able to cover all of them with the BRC infrastructure. So we still have BACs that are currently in operation in districts where you do not have BRCs. And so the BACs are now considered as satellite offices of the BRCs. It's just because of the level of infrastructure, but they are all providing the same services. For example, typically a BAC has just one BAC manager and then one support staff, and then probably a driver. I mean, respectfully, if we have an aggressive program for small and medium enterprise development in a district, you cannot have such a lean organization providing the type of services that is required. And so that was the need for building a new, I would say, institutional structure. But essentially, it is an enhancement of the BACs.
All right, to my last question. Call them viewer interest questions. Cement and iron rod prices skyrocketing after information about goods to be allowed, after information and sensitization, plans in place so that traders know goods that are allowed, and Ecowas free goods movement. A number of companies have complained lately, for example, the latest Interplus, how they have lost deals and have lost billions of cedis because of charges that they are now asked to pay, especially by Francophone countries since the introduction of AFTA. And fruit exporters, especially to UK, also complain about our inability to have a trade deal with UK since Brexit happened in December. So, my question, Honourable Nominee, what plans do you have to ensure that information about how ACTA will operate will be upgraded, and how soon should traders exporting to UK expect a deal with the UK as far as exports of especially fruit is concerned?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I think the honourable member has kind of fused together so many things, so I wasn't too sure how to connect them. But if I understand you well, the issue in respect of challenges with Ecowas trade, I think I addressed it earlier, that we've, through engagement and consultation with member states within Ecowas and with the oversight support of the Ecowas Commission, have been dealing with these issues from time to time, particularly with Benin, Nigeria, and so on and so forth. With AFTA, I also responded to an earlier question about some of the new elements and components of AFTA, which would help us not replicate the challenges in the free flow of goods between countries. So I addressed that earlier. Now, with respect to Ghana-UK trade, I think it was in response to a question from the minority leader. I've given an extensive review of where we are with the Ghana-UK trade agreement. And just to conclude on the point that after a series of consultations and engagement, hopefully on the 5th of December, on the 5th of March, Ghana will sign a new trade agreement with the UK to become to come into force on the 5th of March. Oh, so that was another one. The cement and iron ores, can you repeat that part of the question?
Yes, that's why I call them viewer concerns. Cement and iron ore prices have been skyrocketing of late. What could be the reason?
Now, as I'm sure you're aware, Honourable Member, the significant component of cement is imported from outside the country, and that's clinker. And unfortunately, the prices of clinker, because it's an internationally traded commodity would also affect the local price of cement. In addition to that, because the imported content is so high, fluctuations in the foreign exchange rate has also been a factor influencing domestic prices. We have a constant dialogue and engagement with the Association of Cement Producers, and they've given us their cost build-up anytime that there's an increase in clinker price or an increase in or changes in foreign exchange rate, and then also sometimes freight shipping costs because it's a bulk commodity. So at any given time, if there's a cost for increasing the price of cement based on these factors, we consult with the industry. Yeah, so basically that's the explanation. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, this is Tariff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Honourable Nominee, by Act 911, the Mahama-led administration in 2016 established the Ghana Export and Import Bank to, among other things, support the financing of export development and promotion in Ghana. A lot of MSMEs have complained that it's very difficult to access funding
what measures are you going to put in place to ensure that qualified MSMEs are able to access this funding to promote export?
Thank you, Chair. Honorable Member, the Ministry of Finance has direct oversight responsibility for Ghana Exim Bank. And so there's a limitation as to what explanation I can give in respect of the question that you posed. But I must say that we work very closely with Exim. In actual fact, a significant number of the 1D1F projects have been financed through Exim. But as I'm sure the honorable member is aware, Exim Bank is a policy bank, unlike the other commercial banks that mobilize deposits, from the general public. They have a dedicated source of, I would say, capitalization from government, through the levies that are charged. So they have constraints in terms of how much money they have at any given time to finance projects. But I'm aware that they've gone beyond just the money that is received from the levy to be able to identify other sources of funding to help enhance their capital base. So my understanding, although I cannot speak fully for Exim, my understanding is that they are doing quite well, and their challenge is one of resources. But if there are very specific cases where you believe that a company has been on the drawing board for consideration and it has been unduly delayed, I'll be more than pleased to work with you outside this exercise to see whether we can help facilitate the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In 2018, Ghana earned about $378 million from the export of raw cashew nuts. What policy will you put in place to ensure that we add value to our cashews before we export?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Honorable Member, I made reference to the launching of a new national export development strategy. And one of the commodities that we've prioritized is cashew, and not just exporting raw cashew, but actually processing and adding value to cashew. The major constraint with the processing of cashew is that there are, I would say, traders from all over the world, particularly from India, that offer higher prices to our cashew farmers, and as it were, entice them to sell their cashew crop to them for raw export, rather than giving their products or commodities to the processors, because the processors have a limitation on how much they can buy, if they want to be competitive on the global market for processed cashew. And so there's always that tension between the price offered by, let's say, these traders as compared to the processors. But fortunately, under the Tree Crop Development Authority, again, cashew has been prioritized. And so part of the work that the Cashew Development Authority will be doing, particularly, I know that's also not under my ministry, but we'll work with them closely to ensure that there's enough cashew crop to support our processing industry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, my last will be on Ghana's textile industry. Honorable nominee, we know there are lots of articles, write-ups on Ghana's ailing textile industry. I can readily remember one by Peter Quarty, the textiles and clothing industry in Ghana. What are you going to do about Ghana's textile industry if you are given the nod for the next 4 years?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Honorable member, the challenge in the textile industry has persisted over several decades in our country. There were the good old days when you had the textile industry employing close to 30,000 people, but over the years, for a number of reasons, this has dwindled significantly. Now, when we took office in 2017, we engaged with the industry to put in place a comprehensive program for reform in the textile industry. And there are various elements of this reform program. One is the introduction of what we call tax stamps or authentication stamps, meaning that any importer that is bringing in imported textile prints has to have a tax stamp or an authentication stamp which will identify that particular product that a duty has been paid on it. So that is something that we are working to put in place. We are working very closely with industry. The other policy measure was that we have decided to designate Tema Port as the single corridor for bringing in imported textiles. Because a lot of the smuggling, we realized, were coming from the land borders, from the east. And so we've designated Tema going forward as a single entry point. So that's another policy measure when put in place will hopefully deal with the imported. We've also introduced what we call a textile import management system, where we would, together with the importers and the local manufacturers, agree at any given point in time how much textile prints should be imported into the country to ensure that there's no imbalance between what is locally produced and the demand for textiles. It is also meant to ensure that the piracy of local designs can be managed so that each manufacturer has to register their designs and each importer has to register their designs so that we can use that to check piracy. Another policy measure is government is providing incentives to local textile companies to improve their competitiveness. Government has already zero-rated VAT for companies in the textile industry for 3 years. There's a waiver on import duties for raw materials, plant and machinery for the textile companies. There's also a deferred VAT payment for the... So there are a number of incentives that have been introduced to support the local industries. In addition to that, we are facilitating credit to support these companies from the local banks. And last but not the least, we have agreed that we will have a market surveillance strategy or task force that hopefully will be able to monitor the market and to ensure that there's compliance with these policy measures that I've discussed. So you'll see that the tension that used to exist has actually gone down quite considerably in the textile sector. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Leadership.
Did you ask? You've not asked your question.
Mr. Chairman, Honorable Gidela too hasn't had. If we give her just one.
Give it to her and she didn't take it, oh? Yes, please take one.
Chairman, thank you very much. Senior nominee, I like your African print. It's nice. Can you kindly just give us an assurance that Ayensu Starch Factory will finally be up and running so that the youth in Autu Senya West can get the necessary employment and all other economic benefits? It was one of the special initiatives when you were Ministry of Trade and Industry in President Kufuor's era. We've just completed a 4-year term of being Ministry of Trade and Industry again. You are going ahead for another 4-year term again. Can you please give us that assurance that when two elephants are fighting, the grass that suffers will stop suffering? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Honorable Member, as you rightly said, I initiated the establishment of the Ayensu Starch Factory during the PSI days under President Kufuor. So I have a sentimental attachment to that project, and anytime I'm back in government, it is a priority for me. I must say, though, that regrettably, there have been challenges with Ayensu, which basically is what has given rise to the comment that you are making. And I think, Mr. Chair, with your indulgence, it's appropriate that I set the record straight. In April 20, let me backtrack a little bit. The company was offered to a company called Tiberius, which is, let's say, a subsidiary of the Zoomline company. That was in August 2015. 70% of the shares were offered to the Zoomline company, and the bid price, through a competitive bidding process, the bid price was $4,450,000 US. Now, as a condition for allocating the 70% shares, the company Zoomline was required to pay 50% or 50% of the share price, and so the Zoomline company made an initial payment of $2,269,000, representing 51% of the shares. Now, there was a requirement in the sales and purchase agreement for Zoomline to complete the payment of the outstanding money to be able to have full control over 75% of the shares. But meanwhile, the company had been handed over to Tiberius. Now, regrettably, along the line, by the time we came into office in 2017, the company was no longer operational for a number of reasons. And meanwhile, the balance, the outstanding amount in excess of $2 million has also not been paid by Zoomline. So Pricewaterhouse, which was the transaction advisor, we engaged them to see whether we could have an amicable resolution of this matter. However, as I speak now, the money has still not been paid. And according to the provisions of the sales and purchase agreement, the company that's Zoomline was then supposed, or the shares of the company was supposed now to revert back to government in a certain proportion. So again, we wrote to them that government, by the provisions of the agreement, now had the majority shares. We tried to engage with each other. Regrettably, it ended up that the Zoomlion company actually was unable to pay the workers for quite some time. So the ministry actually stepped in, and we were compelled to pay outstanding salaries of the workers from September 2018 to December 2019 in order to prevent chaos amongst the, Now, again, going forward, the company, that Zoomlion's company, actually abandoned the factory. And so we had to request for security from the police to make sure that there was no interference with the factory. Now, along the line, I think Zoomlion's company filed a writ in court, an injunction against the government to prevent us from interfering with the company, which I think is regrettable, because if you still have an outstanding amount of money to pay, the easiest thing is to pay up, and then basically we resolve these matters, But I think that I would like to end here because the matter is still in court. But I want to give you the full assurance, Honorable Member, because I know the company is also dear to your heart, that we will find ways and means of, once the court order is vacated, we can find ways and means of finding a lasting solution to this problem. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, we would appreciate a copy of any report. Excuse me. Thank you. If there's any report towards that effect, because Zoomlion is not here to defend themselves. So we'll take your word. But we just need the factory to work for the youth to get work to do. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Yes. Yes, let me listen to you.
Mr. Chairman, at the beginning of sitting this morning, you drew our attention to some COVID protocols. It appears we have sat for more than 3 hours, and I believe that we are in breach of our own rules. If leadership can advise us on that, we'll be happy.
When it was exactly 2 hours, I suspended sitting, and we resumed a little less than an hour ago. So the leaders will make sure we stay within 1 hour, I'm sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I want to find out from the nominee the number of agencies that are under his ministry.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I can do a quick numbering of it and then give that to you. Yeah.
Now, I'm talking about the number of agencies, the agencies under you. The agencies under the Ministry of Trade and Industry.
Okay. There's Standards Authority.
Okay.
There's the Ghana Free Zones Board.
Okay.
There's Trade Fair Authority, which is a private company, but in a sense, it's still part of our network. Then the SSI, which is now the Ghana Enterprises Agency. And then there is Gratis, which is a program under the Rural Enterprises program. And then, of course, by extension, there are these other companies like Ayensu, Japan Textiles, Commander Sugar Factory, that are not agencies but are affiliated to.
Mr. the reason I'm asking this is that when I went through your handing over notes.
When you went through what?
Your handing over notes. The handing over notes.
Yes, okay.
Completely missing
was Ghana Trade Fair Authority. Is there any reason why in your handover note there was no mention of the Ghana, Trade Fair Authority?
As I said, these private companies that have governing boards established under the company's code have a different kind of relationship with the ministry. And that's probably the only reason why you didn't find it on
Mr. Chairman, is the same with Ghana Standard Authority? Is the same with Ghana Export Promotion Authority?
It is not. Trade Fair Authority is different. As I said, it's a private company. Standards Authority is an agency of government. And Ghana Export Promotion is also...
The reason why I'm asking this is because that's why I first asked you, the agencies under you. And you mentioned the Trade Fair Company, sorry. Yeah, you mentioned Trade Fair Company as one of the agencies under you.
You mean in this?
Yes, when I asked about the agencies under you, you mentioned Trade Fair Company.
Just to clarify, it's a private company with shares.
But the oversight is
fully held by government. It's not an agency, it's a private company.
So it's a private company, but the supervisory rule is under your ministry.
Yes, we have ministerial oversight, but I've indicated in a number of my responses that there's a limitation in terms of the oversight compared to other agencies.
In an earlier answer to a question about the redevelopment, you said that because you had this not firm grip because of the way you operate, it was an operational thing and you didn't have in-depth knowledge about what happened during the procurement and what have you. Did I get you right?
I indicated that there was a board in place, the management team that supervised the process. If you're talking about the current process that they are going through, then that has been supervised by the board and then the management team. But there's an interministerial committee that has been established by cabinet to which they report. So it's not just the Ministry of Trade and Industry.
I was asking this because earlier when, I think, if I remember very well, Honorable Sweeney asked and said that because they had a board, you didn't know anything about the procurement breaches that he was talking about. That was under international competitive bidding. That was abrogated, and that led to some crisis. You said because they had a board, you were not familiar with the issue. Is that the impression I got in answering that question?
Chairman, I said we were not directly supervising the exercise.
But you remember that there was a subcommittee of cabinet to investigate the abrogation of those tenders, which was chaired by you.
Can you come again? There was a subcommittee.
Maybe let me go this way. Do you remember Reroy Company Limited?
Yes, I do.
They wrote a petition to you about this abrogation of contract by the Ghana Trade Fair Company Limited.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Yes, I remember. Yes, I do.
And you remember that you responded to their letter and you even met them. You remember that?
Yes, I remember. Honorable Member, I'm trying to understand the inquiry. So I remember that they made a representation that they had gone through a bid process during the term of office of the previous government, and that they've realized that the bid process and the offer to them has been truncated. And obviously, as I said, my first effort was to contact the transaction advisors. And the transaction advisors indicated that the bid process was completed and an offer was made to the company Leroy, but they did not fully execute the terms of the sales and purchase agreement, on the basis of which the original offer that was made to them was withdrawn. So that's the basis for that, nothing more, nothing less.
Okay, so did you seek to get those documentation to ascertain what the transaction advisors were telling you were the facts, or it was just based on the briefing they gave you?
No, as I have indicated, Mr. Chairman, I consulted with the transaction advisor. He showed me the documents, and on the face of the documents, it was clear that the offer had been made to them. They were supposed to pay money into an escrow account. It did not happen, and on the basis of that, the offer was withdrawn. I had extensive discussions with Leroy and actually encouraged the company to work along. I mean, unfortunate as it was, I mean, if the offer has been withdrawn, it has been withdrawn. But because the project was going to be started again, I had suggested and proposed to the company to work along with the new management and the board to ensure that when the new bid process was going to be initiated, that they would have, let's say, the opportunity of participating in that bid. So basically, that's what.
Okay, so the subcommittee of cabinet that you were chairing,
yeah.
Did you prepare this report to cabinet for a report?
Yes, I mean that has been the basis for what I'm telling you now.
No, I wanted to be sure whether there's finality by you reporting to cabinet when this subcommittee was formed to investigate this matter, that you were conclusive that these were the facts, and you have reported back to cabinet, and cabinet have accepted that, oh, there was no any wrongdoing. I just wanted to be sure that there's finality on that matter.
Thank you, Chair. Honorable Member, I cannot recall exactly the report that was made, and it's not every subcommittee of cabinet that reports unless the matter has come up. But the Ministerial facilitation team has been apprised of this development.
Mr. Chairman, even though he rightly said the Trade Fair Company Limited is more or less operating like a business that has a board of directors, are you aware that the Trade Fair land lease has expired? The land, the Trade Fair, where they are situated, the land, the lease has expired. Are you aware?
Mr. Chairman, to the best of my knowledge, the matter has been handled by Lands Commission. It has been regularized, and any information in respect of that can be ascertained from the Lands Commission. They've handled this together with the board and management. That has been regularized, and the lease, the transfer has been effected.
Mr. Chairman, earlier he was answering a question with regards to the Commander Sugar project, and he, if I heard you right, you said the valuation that was done in 2016 valued the project as $34 million, right? In 2016?
In 2016, yes.
And do you remember which company did the valuation?
It was a company that was a center that was appointed by the transaction advisor, a center.
And was it PwC?
It was the transaction advisor, PwC, that appointed the company, the valuation company.
So, and you said when PwC, the same PwC, then did the revaluation in 2017, the value reduced drastically. That was the word you used. Is that my understanding?
Yes, very much so.
What was the value, the revaluation? What value came up?
I think the second valuation, which was done by the company called, I think I have the name, Valuation Appraisal Consults, they valued it at $12 million.
Which was still supervised by the same transaction advisor, PwC?
Yes, Honor.
Honorable nominee, you didn't find anything wrong that one transaction advisor, the same transaction advisor, getting a company to do valuation, and in just about 11 months, the same transaction advisor does another valuation, and we lose close to $22 million in value. That didn't ring any bell.
Mr. Chairman, in actual fact, contrary to what you are saying, because of the controversy that has been hanging over the company since we took over, and I've already made this point earlier on, we were very interested in interrogating the value of this company and establishing the facts once and for all. Because even during the previous government's term of office, when the valuation, or not the bid process, was conducted, literally almost all the bidders bid below $15 million. So I was a bit surprised that you have a company that is valued at $35 million. Everybody is bidding below $15 million. And I took an interest in this. So I also talked to industry experts. And I don't remember any of them that had suggested that the value of this would exceed, let's say, $20 million, albeit without valuation. This is just industry experts talking. And you remember I made the point that based on all this, we had requested for a forensic audit to be undertaken independently by IOCO. And the report of IOCO actually confirms and establishes the value of the plant and machinery that is in question at $15.4 million. So again, I cannot speak on behalf of the transaction advisor. Yes, indeed, they recruited the first consultants, and we requested, because of all the controversy, that they appoint another group, and they did that, and then they presented the report to us. So, and as I've established, whether it was the bid process during the previous government's term of office, or currently, or during, let's say, our term of office, when another bid process was issued, we had the same challenge in terms of value and how much people were bidding for. So basically, that's what I can say.
Mr. Chairman, my worry was, as the sector minister with the oversight responsibility, what questions or what answers did you demand from PwC, the transaction advisor? Because my worry is they advised and they chose the first evaluators that valued at 34. The same advisors now chose another company. They brought it to 12 billion. And I thought it would be fair as the minister to be asking the transaction advisors what account for this huge variation. and I don't know whether they were able to get you some answer, or you didn't find necessary to ask the PwC why the huge variation?
Mr. Chairman, the answer is simple. They recruited a consultant to do valuation. They had a certain value. Based on, the same analysis that had been done by different experts, we wanted another valuation to be done, and they came out with that. And as I've suggested and submitted in my earlier response, almost totally, all the bids that came put the price of the facility around 12 to 15 million dollars. So the fact that they did an earlier valuation and they estimated it at 34 does not mean that is there. But at any rate, just to give you comfort, a forensic audit has been undertaken, and they've established the price, and this was done by CSIR, which is a government agency. So I do not want to get involved in deciding. When it comes to the forensic audit and the matter is interrogated, the real facts will be established.
Well, Chairman, maybe the reason why I've stayed around this for long is my expectation was that PwC should have had some answers to provide, because they were technical and a specialized group. That's why they were engaged to advise and to supervise those activities. So if they did and accepted the first valuation, now another valuation comes and they don't have any answer to provide, I found that to be not satisfactory, because I thought that they should be able to explain. You are technical people. How did you accept the first one? That is so varied with this second one. But anyway, Mr. Chairman, what I wanted to find out is that you said in your earlier answer about the necessary things that were needed to say that this factory was complete. You talk about the crusher, you talk about the horizontal and vertical crystallizers, and you said that it was only the horizontal crystallizers that were installed, but without the vertical. So it meant that when the testing was done, it was not full. It was not a complete test. Is that the impression?
Yes, indeed.
So when they did the test, the sugar that came out of it, you want to mean was a brown sugar, or which kind of sugar?
Mr. Chairman, yes, indeed, that's the case. I know this is not a court of law where you admit evidence, but I specifically brought with me, let's say, the product that came out of the test run, basically to show whether it is white sugar or brown sugar, because the controversy has been that it produced white sugar. And I know that in the petition, there was a reference to my deputy minister having made a statement to the fact that it was white sugar. But this is basic engineering. If you have, let's say, components of machinery that has to be present to produce a certain effect, and it is not there, there's no way you can get that. So, I mean, unless this is contrary to your procedure here, I would like them to show you the product to see whether it is white sugar or brown sugar. And basically, the matter then will be laid to rest.
Well, even the chairman, as he makes effort to
but we can go.
I mean, I'm not necessarily going to. What I just want to find out, whether the minister will say that this company was conceived and implemented in error. Will it be right for anybody to say this? That this company was conceived and implemented in error? Chairman, if the Honorable Whip, I'm not supposed to, I was Minister for Trade. I have restrained myself not to join the discussion because of the whip. But some of the issues are not being, we need to re-examine the details. I managed to speak on my last function as Minister for Trade was on 14th August 2014, and it was to cut short with President Mahama for the commencement of the Commander Sugar Factory. Now, as to competitiveness, and Minister, you can check your record, the Indian government had written formally for misprocurement of Commander Sugar Factory. So I had to step back and reintroduce a new process in making a determination who won the contract. And it went through an international competitive process satisfactory to the Indian High Commission. What the Honorable Muntaka has asked now, I will say policy error because we all didn't do what was right. When President Mahama was commissioning Commander Sugar Factory, if you watch the clip, that morning the Indian government approved an additional 24.1 million to support the further development of outgrowers and irrigation, which up till date have not been utilized. So we are just putting up the factory without doing what was necessary to support sugar plantation. Then we also had evidence that one of the water bodies there, which supported sugarcane development in 1967, because of Galamsey and others, I just assure this to attitude. The fall in the numbers, the sharp fall, the same price Waterhouse. Why would you value a property at this level? And only within 10 and 11 months, probably, we needed an independent assessment, not by price Waterhouse again. That's what I'll say whilst you continue, just to put the facts right.
So, Chairman, I'll just continue. That will the minister say that this company was conceived and implemented in error? Will you agree with anybody who says this?
Mr. Chairman, respectfully, following the interjection of the minority leader, I agree with him completely. I am not here to respond on behalf of Pricewaterhouse, but what I did, which was the only way you can have an independent assessment based on the facts, is through the forensic audit. And the forensic audit report is then considered as the independent valuation that the minister is, the minority leader is talking about. Yes, so that's the forensic audit. But then specifically as to the question about the fact that it might have been conceived in error, it is difficult to understand the nature of the question because there were technical challenges. Because number one, I think the Honorable Member of Parliament ought to know that there were major challenges with land availability around the factory because the original 1967 construction, which had extensive land supporting sugarcane cultivation, had been encroached on. And as I'm sure you are aware, if you plant sugarcane at a distance beyond a certain recommended radius, you actually lose the sucrose content of the sugar. And so that will result in operational, let's say, inefficiencies. So, for example, if you look at this particular case of where was the land to grow the sugarcane, if your answer was that there was not enough land available to feed the factory with sugarcane, you may interpret it as, I can't remember what you said, concept an error in concept or something like that. Basically.
Whether it was conceived
in error.
And implemented in error.
Yes. So as I'm saying, it could be one of the factors that you consider if you want to determine whether it was conceived in error.
So from what the answers that you also gave, it really meant that some sugar was produced in the company.
When you say some sugar was produced, when you do test run, you don't produce sugar in quantities that you can describe as some quantity of sugar was produced. It's just a test run.
Yeah, so even if it was
in quantities that you can describe as some quantity of sugar was produced. It's just a test run.
Yeah, so even if it was just test and President Mills tasted some sugar, that sugar was not imported sugar outside the factory, but it was sugar that was really produced in that factory.
Are you referring to President Mills? I'm not aware that President Mills tasted.
But there was this argument that no sugar has ever been produced there, and the sugar that was tested was imported from abroad.
Did you say President Mills? That's what he's asking you, because he was not sure President Mills was there.
Yeah, President Mama, sorry.
Well, Honorable Member, I'm not in the position to testify to the tasting of sugar by President Mahama. But what I can tell you as a technical fact is that because there was, let's say, some missing components of the equipment, what is described as white sugar was not produced during the test run. And it's a matter of record.
You spoke about the Agrotech, Ghana Limited, and you were talking about shared purchase agreement or concession agreement. Which one is it? Is it concession agreement or shared purchase agreement?
Can you come again?
You are talking about the nature of the agreement that we are going into currently with the Agrotech Ghana Limited.
Okay.
Right?
All right.
I wanted to be sure which kind of agreement are we having with them, even though you said it's not yet completed.
Yeah. So, Mr. Chairman, again, just to back up respectfully, when we talk about sugar, you still have brown sugar come out of the process. So that's what I was referring to, just in case I'm not mistaken in referring to the fact that no sugar was produced. Yes. But again, we are talking now about a concession agreement. A concession agreement. That's what I was referring to.
So, even though you claim, you in your earlier answer, you said the process is not yet complete. What are some of the terms in there that you may want to share with us?
They are looking for certain incentives. For example, they would require a permit to bring in raw sugar to, let's say, produce during the period where they are now cultivating sugarcane to feed the plant. They are asking for protection, has been done, and they are hoping that they can generate some profit to be able to pay their concession fee, that we must ensure that the market is not flooded by cheap sugar. There are a number of areas that they've drawn attention to, which is being finalized. These are genuine areas of concern. But maybe I must mention that we've developed a new sugar policy, which hopefully would come before this honorable House, particularly because of certain incentives that are required to attract major investors into the industry. And so we are hoping that that when that is done, it may respond to some of the issues raised. But we are pushing that even before the sugar policy is brought before this House. If they can still finalize the concession agreement to enable the factory to at least be operationalized, subject to further incentives that may be granted. So that's where we are now.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to find out from what has it taken us almost 4 years to get to where we are? Couldn't we have gotten this over and got the factory running much earlier than where we are now?
Mr. Chairman, again, I've been very conscious of making sure that I don't take too much time getting into the details. But I have a detailed timeline analysis of what has happened over the years. All this talk about valuation, revaluation, forensic audit, all these things take time. Even going through another bid process, you are quite experienced in this, but you know that it takes time. You know, we are even more eager than anybody else to ensure that the project takes off.
Mr. Chairman, so will you be willing to share this the timetable that he's talking about? Are you willing to share with this committee those details of the processes that have brought us to where we are and where we are hoping to be able to get this factory running?
Oh, yes, if you're talking about what it has taken for us to get to where we are, yes, I have a detailed chronological analysis of when we started.
And you are willing to provide a copy to the committee?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I can extract it.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, the vehicle manufacturing plants that we have, you've had a number of agreements, right? You've had a number of agreements with these automobiles to establish in Ghana, right?
Yes, we have.
How many do you have so far?
Currently we have Kantanka, we have Toyota, we have Toyota and Suzuki, we have Nissan, and then we are just, and then Sinotruck, and then we are just about to issue a bona fide assembly license also for some other Isuzu, and then for Peugeot.
I just want to find out whether any of them was international. Is any of them an international agreement? I know Kantanka is fully owned by a Ghanaian. Yeah. I'm wondering whether any of the other companies are owned by foreigners.
No, it cannot be, because these assemblers are, I would say, assembling on behalf of the global manufacturing companies. And that's the standard practice. So they will give you a technical license, and you, as a local company, you produce under their technical supervision. So the companies are owned by Ghanaians.
So, Mr. Chairman, I just want to find out.
But if I can also say that in cases where, for example, Toyota decides that they will not work through a local assembler, but they will do it directly, that will be an agreement. And it's not typically an agreement, it's a licensing agreement for them to be able to establish an assembly plant.
So, Mr. Chairman, so having heard the minister repeatedly say assembly plants, so they are actually not manufacturing vehicles, they are only assembling them. Is that right?
Mr. Chairman, that's how the industry is managed all over the world. You start, it's a progressive escalation. You start with assembly, and then once you start a component manufacturing, let's say, business,
then you gradually add local content by components that are produced locally, and then you move on from assembly to enhanced, so we move from SKD to enhanced SKD. This is semi-knockdown, that's the SKD, and it's all assembly. And then the final stage will then be fully manufactured, because with all the components manufactured locally. It's just the way the industry is established and managed.
Mr. Chairman, in an earlier answer to a question about this Nigeria-Ghana trade clashes, you said that you currently have some agreed framework. Is that what I heard you say?
Yes, indeed.
So this framework is outside the Ecowas treaty that we all are aware of?
The ECOWAS?
The Ecowas treaty.
Well, I think in an earlier response that I gave in respect of this matter, I indicated that the standard provision in the GIPC law is that certain enterprises or activities are reserved for Ghanaians. So there's no confusion about that. But then I also indicated that there are other local regulations and laws that have to be respected if you want to do retail business, whether you are a Ghanaian or you are a foreigner. And so part of what we've done is to ensure that the foreigners, not only ECOWAS citizens, other citizens who are not Ghanaians, follow all these rules that we are talking about. So we are not sidestepping the GIPC provision. But in the case of ECOWAS, as I indicated, we've managed now to agree that the provisions of our local laws and legislation and regulations have to be respected. But in ensuring that we enforce these laws, that we will give them an opportunity to regularize their trade, just to ensure that in the spirit of long-standing bonds of friendship, that we give them an opportunity to regularize their trade. So that's the arrangement I was talking about.
Yes, lastly, I just want to find out whether you know Dennis Eje Jumo.
Come again?
Dennis Eje Jumo. Whether you know the gentleman. Dennis Eje Jumo.
Yes, yes.
He works in your law firm.
Well, I'm a silent partner in that law firm.
Oh, you are a silent partner?
Yes.
But it doesn't take away
because
your partnership.
I cannot practice, actively whilst I'm in government.
And he is the Minister of Trade and Industry rep on NIB?
Yes.
Why? Because this is somebody working in your law firm and he's representing Minister of Trade and Industry. The rep that Minister of Trade and Industry is supposed to take on NIB. And you think that is right?
The provision or the requirement, and it's not only for NIB, you have the flexibility to nominate any representative, except if it is required by the provision establishing the particular organization, that you have to nominate a director of the ministry or so on and so forth. So we have many people serving on boards, and what you are required to do normally will be that the company, in this case NIB, would request for, let's say, a lawyer because they are composing their team. And so I know his competence, and so that's why I proposed.
No, but I thought that he's not a staff of Minister of Trade and Industry, but the Minister of Trade and Industry will nominate a person who is not working within the ministry to represent it on a board that Ministry of Trade and Industry is supposed to have a rep.
Yeah, I've just explained, Honorable Member, if maybe I wasn't clear, that there are enactments that specify that you have to nominate, let's say, a director or some other official of the Ministry of Trade, no below a certain rank. But in many others, there's no specific requirement, and there are many cases where we have nominees that are not they are not staff of the Ministry of Trade. That was the explanation I was giving.
Yes, Chairman, thank you very much.
Yes, Honorable. Thank you very much.
Chairman, I should thank you, but Honorable Minister, just to take it from the Honorable Muntaka, I think when you get back and when you do get approved, you probably will want to check the records once again on Commander Sugar Factory. As captured in your own handing over note, page 54 of your handing over notes, financials, and I just quoted and shared some details with you. For the implementation of the project, the government of Ghana secured a $35 million Citi LOC from the Indian Exim Bank of India for the construction of the sugar processing factory. And Minister, to put it on record, that the Indian Sugar Federation shortlisted the 6 companies for the government of Ghana. It went through a competitive bid process and was approved by the Central Tender Board under the chairmanship of Dr. Ajay. So I just thought that when you go back, you can check this record. What we need to do is to find out the role of Price Waterhouse, because I share the view that it's been undervalued. That is my view. So probably we should work towards a re-evaluation of it by an independent person. But I just thought that this should be on the record. And as I've introduced it based on your own handing over note, what I do know is that sugar loves water, land, and sunshine. So further development is like Depale in Nasia area, and then Daboya connecting through Savlugu. We probably can look at it, and I believe that the Mauritius government was interested in it. That's why they requested for the double taxation regime with the government of Ghana. Do we have a sugar policy? Are you contemplating a sugar bill? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a sugar policy which has been approved by Cabinet, and there are certain incentives that are required under the policy to be provided to support the development of the industry. And so in due course, hopefully very soon, we'll be bringing, let's say, a draft bill here to Parliament for consideration and approval.
Thank you, Chair. What's the fate of the Northern Star Tomato Company in the Upper East region, Palogu, and why is it not benefiting from government stimulus support as the only surviving factory or industry in that area, the Palogu tomato factory? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. The Honorable Minority Leader, we have for a long time been working at getting private investors, strategic investors, to take over the Palogu factory. As I speak now, we have 5 major companies that have expressed interest. We haven't gone through a formal bid process because all of them wanted to do their own technical assessment and investigation even before they would express formally an interest in the company. The major challenge that many of them have indicated is that they want to be sure that they can produce tomatoes at a competitive price for
processing. Well, that was.
So, can they be assured of government support in the coming years under your watch as minister if you do get approved?
Yes, I can give you that assurance.
What's the status of the Ayensu starch factory? What happened to it? $7 million investment over the years. And are you aware that even today in Ghana, there is shortage of beer because of the raw materials that is required to produce it owing to COVID? Ghanaians in the value chain of beer selling are suffering because of low production of beer in the country. I don't drink it. Chairman is excited about beer, but I have friends who are engaged in the beer business and their trade have been largely affected because of the lack of raw materials. I'm relating it to Ayensu starch factory. How come we cannot produce starch in Ghana in commercial quantities to support further industrial development of our country? Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Chairman, I've provided an extensive response to this same issue raised by the Honorable Member from Autu, Senya, East or West? Okay. And I had indicated that...
Honorable, he will move on.
Sorry?
He will move on, so you don't have to repeat the answers.
Yeah, I won't. So that's what I was saying.
But I hope Chairman have taken note that there is threat to shortage of beer in the country, and that is major news for beer consumers. Ghana Standards Authority, you need to revise their legislation to give them meaning in setting quality standards. What assurances do we have from you that you initiate new reforms to restitute the Ghana Standards Authority, including giving them the power and the capacity to do metrology with the discovery of oil in Ghana? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Honorable Member, Minority Leader. The process has been fully exhausted. It's gone through Cabinet, and then hopefully it will be laid before this Honorable House in the next couple of weeks or months. So that review has been done. Thank you, Chair.
Chairman relates to me that you responded to Japan Textiles, Akusumbo Textiles, even where my uncle Honorable Mwakwata used to work, GTP, all of them, no capacity. An industry which used to do 75,000, today you are talking of less than 3,000 workers. What are we not getting right as a country for the development of textile? And do you have any plans for cotton production?
Thank you, Chair. Chairman, once again, I've responded extensively to an earlier question that was raised, and maybe it might not be necessary for me to go over this. Thank you, Chair.
Are you working on an advertising bill or it's been passed?
It's been completed. It's gone through a review by the Attorney General, and so it will come before this House in the next couple of months.
Legislative instrument for Export and Import Act to take care of textile stamp. What's the state of it and what will you do about it?
That has also been the exercise of reviewing the current legislation has been finalized. There needs to be an agreement between the industry players and the company that is supposed to issue the tax stamps. So we are at the final stages of that agreement.
Can we be assured that when you are minister, you work on countervailing measures under the Ghana International Trade Commission Act to allow for early resolution of disputes that may be trade related, and to provide for a legislative instrument to safeguard measures under the Ghana International Trade Commission Act?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Honorable Minority Leader, we've done exactly that. Maybe just to put it on record, that the Ghana International Trade Commission has already concluded its maiden investigation against the importation or the dumping of aluminium coils into Ghana, a complaint that was filed by Aluwex.
And so a formal determination has been made by the Ghana International Trade Commission. You can be assured that that is already actually...
Chairman, Ghanaian contractors are complaining about high cost of steel, iron rods, high cost of cement, which is affecting the construction industry generally. What do you intend to do about it as Minister for Trade and Industry, the escalating prices?
Thank you, Chair. Again, Chairman, I've already provided a response to this question in respect of cement. I've already given, in respect of steel, I know that it's always a big challenge because the cost of scrap continues to escalate. And that's a major reason, because we don't, unless we finalize our project on iron and steel development, we still unfortunately have to deal with scraps, the escalating cost of scraps.
Chairman, I will be ending here with just a comment that the Honorable Alain Kyerematen, as Minister for Trade, to be renewed as Minister of Trade. He knows my strong views on the matter. I think that the Ghana Exim Bank must be situated within the Ministry of Trade and Industry and not the Ministry of Finance. And I've conveyed so strongly on the floor of Parliament here. And I even believe that at worst, the Minister for Trade and Industry should chair the Ghana Exim Bank. And probably to let you appreciate why I said you were the Minister for the Economy, not Finance. The economy, domestic and international, is in your hands. You can stimulate businesses, you can grow entrepreneurs and others. But I still think that you must check your record on the GC net thing, because I believe that if the contract was signed in 2013, it probably was for 10 years. So that would have been 2023, but with a proviso, because you are a respected lawyer, with a proviso that after 5 years, an assessment be done for a re-extension of the time. Chairman, with this comment, I can only wish him well and look forward to Ghana benefiting enormously from AFTED. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Nominee, for attending upon the House. We've done 4 hours, even though today we thought we would do much less. We've done 4 hours with you. You're discharged for now. You'll hear from us.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm grateful to the honorable members. Thank you.
Very well, honorable members. We'll resume in 5 minutes to do the regional minister.